watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
The following video contains content some viewers might find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed here are not facts and are nothing more than entertainment. The views and opinions are not facts and do not represent the views and opinions of Xirtus or our channel, and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views of the guests, YouTube, Google, mainstream media, society, or civilization at large, or anybody. Viewer discretion is advised.
They've finally done it. They've taught humans to play chess with machines.
Oh, fucking right.
But you know what's going on. The Neuralink has just come out, and they're telling you you'll be able to play video games, and they turn it around, and it's not Helldivers 2. it is chess, which is good. I mean, that's a good
No more
game.
secrets.
That's a good game to play. But I mean, I don't know if it's as much for Neuralink, does it? It doesn't sound like a lot. I feel like Neuralink should be more like running and jumping in Flower. I want to see him.
Hadn't they already done that though? Like, weren't there people
in
already
the 80s,
using nodes
you know?
in their head? So it was like
Well, like
already
in the 80s,
established technology. It's not like the next step yet. Can the person download shit?
Dude, in the 80s, they had chess, and voice command systems. I forget the name of it, but there was like a module system you can control all the assets in your house with like cassette tape training, like it would train your voice and everything like that. What was that called? Like the Butler 1980s voice.
Really? And like
There was a movie with Robin Williams about that, the Butler robot.
Yeah,
By
there were these
Tim
boxes called the Master Voice ECU. Master Voice ECU. I don't know. I just feel like most people didn't have these because they were like $4,000, like $10,000 equivalent or something like that. Is how much they cost. But you could set these up, and then it had like a cool screen, and you could plug them into your home appliances. And this was the beginning of automation for your home appliances, and it used actual Butler in a box chips so that you could record.
Is it like X10?
This is pre X10. This is like
That's
early
wild.
on. Butler in a box.
That's insane.
Yeah, Butler in a not butter in a
For
box.
butcher.
Butler in
Butter in a box.
Butler in a box robot. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to find at this point. But yeah, there you go. This is
Is there
what it
any
looked
other-
like on people's accounts. What do you ask, Stone? What do you ask?
I was going to say, is there any other content related to that individual who had the operation done for Neuralink?
In terms of what? I mean, they just have kind of a video at like interviewing him, talking to him. I
Yeah.
don't know much about him yet. He's
Sure,
the
it's
first
all-
human Neuralink patient.
Yeah,
Any type
sure
of it?
it's all-
Like how fast can you actually generate information through that thing?
His name is William Shakespeare. No, I'm just kidding. But you know how that goes. Who knows how real this guy is? But he could be. But the point is, this is not super fast, but it could be faster because of machine learning training. This will probably become pretty fast. And we have something. I think the thing that's more interesting than the Neuralink right now is the Rabbit AI. Is that what it's called? Have you guys seen this thing? The R1. So this is a pocket device that connects to your computer and your phone and your brain, essentially. Not really, but sort of.
Wait.
The Rabbit, it's a little device that what happens is it records everything you're doing on the, like you're interacting with your device, right? You're on your phone, you're programming, you're doing stuff on your computer, and it records what you do and it learns what you do so it can automate doing that for you. So it's like, hey, you wrote a bunch of emails today to people. I saw how you did that. Do you want me to just do that? Give me access to your computer and I'll write emails for you to the same people.
Okay. So the whole idea
I
of
could
the
see this
Rabbit is
going
for mass
badly.
production. It's a play on words for mass production, right? Like as a company, that's what their symbol. That's what the messaging is you can reproduce like rabbits.
Yeah, which is super lame because like if I were to make automated butler bot, it'd be called the Sorcerer's Apprentice or the Apprentice. You know what I mean? It'd have to be about how you're gonna end up making a bunch of brooms that destroy and create havoc. It has to be built into there should be a warning in the name. I feel like if you make such a magical device, right?
That is a pretty cool device.
The Rabbit idea. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm just wondering why like Siri or Google or anyone hasn't capitalized on that yet. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's 'cause it's like usually these big companies aren't able to be as experimental as they want to be. Like Apple just shut down their car development company. I mean, all this consolidation has led to conservative choices by these companies, not inventive. Everyone was thinking, oh, wait. I mean, this a couple years ago, they're like, we're going to consolidate all the companies and consolidate all the game companies, consolidate all the AI companies. And what you're seeing is less and less coming out because of that is all it.
Well, I think capital's changing too, though. Like what people I think AI is telling people that capital is changing also. So like what you should spend your time on differs from what is more profitable.
Shame on you, memory man. It's so early on to be playing the box saga. This is basically Neuralink because it records everything you do.
It
Right.
knows what you like, and it knows what to play in your head at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, I didn't.
I would be worried.
I get to. You gotta at least say the thing. Fuck Saga!
Good to see you, James.
Fuck Saga! All right. I just wanted to do.
How
my
does that
bit.
mesh with privacy for like a company? Like if I was a worker at a company and all of a sudden I'm filtering all of my emails to this other third party that my boss doesn't know about, that might not be great.
Yeah, I think that the thing is, it's not like what this thing does is it accesses your computer and operates it like you do, like a user. Like it connects into your computer. It's not actually getting the emails onto the device. The device has got a camera. It's got a. It's thinking about it. It just connects to your device. It's SSH and in basically.
Well, I guess
Wow.
that makes sense because the rabbit is not only helping you produce, but it's also fucking you at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know,
it's
but
not trying to replace you at that point.
the irony
Yeah.
being that like people are so worried about Neuralink, but Neuralink is only able to barely get you to play
Even has a
chess.
plus.
This is the thing that's really going to learn how people interact with machines and what they're doing. I think much quicker
Its
than the
nose is
Neuralink
a
will.
plus.
And where
Its
is
nose
this
is a
processing
plus.
being done? Is that device actually running the AI, or is it just going off on a server somewhere else?
I'm sure it's on a server, but it's
Yeah,
you
so
have
you're
a
just teaching the rabbit company to do what you do.
yes, exactly. I don't know who's gonna buy Rabbit, but yeah, probably Apple. That makes the most sense.
That's
though.
some dark shit, man. It's like some dark symbolism. That's weird. That's super
Is it?
weird.
Who's
creepy.
SSHing into those smart washing machines and using all that data?
The Korean mafia. No, I don't know. I mean, it could be anybody, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential for piggybacking onto IoT smart devices. I think that's going to be interesting as time goes on. More and more people are going to be like, wait a second, I can't use my washing machine because it's crunching Bitcoin for the mafia right now. And like, it's like ransom like that. And that could happen, probably will start to happen mostly like apartment buildings. So you get an entire fleet. Like, oh yeah, the Santa Monica apartment building has 30 Samsung washing machines. So we'll just like get the whole, I mean, that's going to, I see that being a major problem actually pretty
Wasn't
soon.
there like almost a toothbrush botnet earlier or late last year?
I don't know about that.
I think there was.
Botnet. What?
A lot of different
Yeah.
devices
Okay,
you can do
well,
a mesh network
It
with.
was overblown, but there was a vulnerability in the toothbrush that could have caused this to be real if it wasn't caught.
This is amazing.
Like if
So
it
you
was
got your
caught by
blue-
black hats before white hats.
They know your dental records.
So no, but like you could use your toothbrushes as what processing devices because they all have.
Like you
Shit,
send
man.
spam emails.
If you're smart, you could use it for
You're
DNA,
sitting there
I
brushing your
guess.
teeth and you're emailing somebody about a Nigerian prince without even realizing it.
Right, with your toothbrush, which now learned from Rabbit how to behave. See, this is how quick it's gonna happen.
You're the one paying the power bill on it.
So this is
Have you
also
ever heard of the
interesting.
Internet of Things? Do you know
Yeah.
what that
Yeah,
concept
that's what that
is?
is.
We IoT. That's what we were talking about. Yeah. You know, every
Yeah.
one of us
Internet of
has like
toothbrushes.
we all have 100 Raspberry Pis, right? Like we're all gentlemen here. You know?
I think it's
Yeah,
more
but
than
mine's not
that,
powered
though.
on.
I just ordered a few Raspberry 5s because I saw that you can overclock your Raspberry Pi 5 to Pi. 3.14
Drop into the
gigahertz.
board modularly.
Because no, you can tweak it to 3.14 gigahertz.
That's
Pi.
wild. You better
I know,
cool that
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you have to use
In
a
a
cooler on there
freezer.
now,
Yeah.
or some sort of like a metal plate at least. But point is, yeah, everyone's gonna have devices pretty soon. Even like the Pi Nano.
I just
Pico
feel like
Nano.
there's already devices like the Apple Watch and everything. I know my wife was showing me like her sleep chart on how much sleep she was getting every night. And I'm like,
My
you're not the only
Samsung
one
used
who's
to track
getting that. You're not the only one who's getting that, or like they're not just giving that information to you. They know like your entire habit. Like they know how much sleep you're getting at night. Like they know, like it's the worst things in the world we were told to be afraid of. Do you know what I
You're
mean?
giving up
As
your medical
kids,
data.
Every sci-fi movie said, "Don't do that."
I remember Gillette when I was like 16 or 17 sent me a razor blade in the mail. and it was like, "Congratulations on your birthday! Happy birthday! Here's a gift from the Gillette company, Procter and Gamble."
They give you a handle with it.
Yeah, it was all of it. And then I found out a few years later it had like an RFID chip in it, and that Gillette had been using these razors to track like marketing consumer trends. And so they were seeing like where these razors went, because if you went through airports and things like that, you go through RFID readers, it pings out and it records back to the thing. So the razor blade has a recording of the last places that it's been, and it tells it every place it goes through a new RFID reader. So it's like, oh, this kid's been to like 30 people
before I put it in my luggage now.
This kid's been to like 30 countries in the last few years, you know, like
They
going to his razor
market
blade.
it as like a travel razor. Like, here's your free travel razor.
It's
Put this
perfect.
in
Oh
your-
yeah,
And then
it's not gonna get taken off if you want
They
a
just
plane.
hope it ends up being recycled and coming back to them. How long until like AI starts following us in, you know, physical reality, like either as like a car or a robot or a drone or something
There's
like that?
Boston Dynamics robots
can
they're putting
already.
AI into now.
I feel like, why would it want to if it's already on your wrist and in your pocket? You know what I mean? Like, it's already around you. By the time you get to where you're going, it's waiting for you. You know, it's got that kind of omnipotence.
It almost kills paranoia in a way, because if they wanted you, you'd already be dead. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's everything about us is basically we don't even opt out of it. Most of us are too lazy. We're just like, whatever. But if anybody gets your Google account, you're fucked. Everything is on your Google. You can sign into anything with Google. I mean, that one little small membrane is your.
What kind of blows my mind is, like, I remember as a kid, there'd be these sci-fi movies where they're like, well, nobody ever looks at the photo and the ID. Like in Gattaca, they're like, no one ever even looks at the photo. They're just looking at your DNA, and they like want it to scan. I'm like, that's never going to happen. And we're literally at that point now where people are getting arrested from AI security camera training footage that picks up the wrong person, and nobody checks that the person lives in the wrong place or looks like the wrong person. They're just like,
and they just
trusting
enhance the
system.
pixels into a face that just looked like someone else who had been in the store or something like that.
That's happened a few times, yeah, where they've done like, you know, enhancements using trained photos of people.
And Israel's using machine guns with this facial recognition technology on them, and they're the first. Actually, they're the first to put their. Sorry, what?
There's kill drones with that too. They carry like a single grenade, and they'll just set it off as soon as it gets within range of you.
They're the first military to, you know, put them into official action. You can see them at the border stations. There's videos of them on TikTok of the turret towers with facial recognition.
Speaking of evil, James, what do you think of the devil, the beast, and chaos magic and the military? Right?
I just watched a little snippet of the first video played at the White House. I think the movie was called Cabria. I watched a little snippet of it. That was an interesting thing. I didn't get to watch it fully yet, but they said something about the Jews, but I just saw that Star of David on the pictures you were flipping through, so it reminded me of that.
Oh yeah, it's the gospel and the Israeli military drone system. But yeah, James, evil, the world, apocalypse. I don't know, any direction.
Jeez, I don't know. What a runner. I don't know how to take that. I don't know. I think it's kind of a lot of human nature. I don't really think there's much magic to it, you know. You know, I think sort of you know, those things being paired together, I don't really think there's much of that sort of thing. But I don't know. You never know, you know.
You don't think of you don't see like the current events as being like occult driven, occult war, occult AI. You know, people always talking about using AI to bring forth demons or angels, etc. You don't see there being occult connections to the state of the world today, or people trying to bring forth occult.
Well, I mean, like accelerationism or something like that. You know, I'm sure there's people that are into, you know, chaos magic or whatever, you know, whatever their ideas are. But, you know, there's only
the only way out of hell is through.
Well, you know, some people would think, but you know, that's like kind of a mechanistic view of you know, nature and time, which I don't really think it is. You know, I don't think it's really that way. Um, you know, I think anything can change at any time. So um, I think it's based on necessity. You know, I think a lot of this is actually karma. So so you kind of have a mix of the age that we're in, um, and you know, karma, and you got shit happening. So you know, countries have karma, individuals have karma, religions have karma. You know, all these things have karma, and it has to be resolved somehow. Um, so yeah.
So you don't think? I mean, it's interesting though that around the world we have all this war right now, and people talk so much about world peace and always the justification for killing more people, creating these machines of wars. Everything is to bring forth peace. I mean, do you tie that to love is the law, or is that more? You know, do you see chaos as kind of do you see a destructive force that's behind like politics and the world powers?
Well, so
Anything?
you
Sorry,
said
go on.
love. You said love is the law. It's
Yeah, but yeah,
not.
the Roman numerals for 93, and I was just gonna be staring at it. Yeah.
Yeah. um, yeah. So we could talk about that for a second. None of this would be like true will, except if it's you know, souls coming along to act things out to get karma out of the way. You know, um, I think masters do that, right? You have what's called the Great White Brotherhood, which it's not some ethnic thing. It's actually it's kind of like all the advanced souls that um, are kind of around this planet. You know, that's the Great White Brotherhood, right? Um, so you have that going on, but I think aside from that, it's really kind of an aberration from people's true will, you know. So, because if if you do your true will, no other shall say nay, right? It says that in the book of the law. So there wouldn't be conflict if everybody was on their proper orbit, but I don't think people are. Um, so so yeah,
Do
Did you
you do
burn
you
your
think
book?
that maybe? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Did you burn your book?
no, no, that's
Yeah.
the Tunisia comment. I don't really take that as class A writing, you know.
I did burn a
Um,
copy of it to a CD like 20 years ago, so that should count.
yeah, that counts. That counts.
But
Lost
okay,
mine
so
to a fire, but I don't think it actually burned.
So
it's
that's
an interesting idea that the idea that there's karma to process, because do you think then maybe, I mean, that would justify a lot, because you've got a bunch of people that run the world, people are like, why are they making all those horrible things happen? Maybe they're just trying to help humanity process karma. You think that's part of what do you mean by that, you know?
I don't think so. Like, so I don't think the powers that be, if you will, are like, you know,
Dude, if
they're
George Soros is trying to help me process karma, I want to know about it.
yeah, they're not like good dudes doing bad things for a good purpose. It's just humans being materialist idiots, you know. And then I think um, bigger events have to happen, and that's like when you know uh, people incarnate to do jobs. Um, so yeah, I don't think like yeah, I don't.
You think a lot of it's material ignorance? Okay. Will, what do you think about that? Do you think that the occult, is it material ignorance that leads to the conspiracy, that like this organic evil that emerges, this processing of karma? Or do you see like a lot of evidence for people in the elite that know about magic and are trying to manipulate magic?
Well, I feel like you have to define what magic is, or what the purpose of magic would be. Like, to say that there's not, I think that people are becoming way too comfortable saying that magic's not a thing. I think that for the majority of like human history, magic has been a thing. But I think that now people misrepresent magic as some sort of technology or whatnot. But
I agree.
And you think it's not a technology? What do you think it is?
no, I think it is a technology. I think that you best understand I think you best understand magic as a technology to understand it better. I think that because like even with like, you know, modern pop culture references often pit technology against magic. Like even in like Ready Player One, they have the world separated in the video game to where there's certain zones where magic is allowed. There's certain zones where magic's not allowed. Technology's allowed. Certain zones where technology's not allowed. Certain zones where both are allowed. And in the Masters of the Universe by Kevin Smith, most recently, they turned He-Man into a whole battle between technology and magic. But what if, I mean, like even the Arthur C. Clarke quote that talks about any technology would be misunderstood by a lesser civilization. You get what I'm saying? You guys know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, any sufficiently advanced technology is magic.
Right, but it all has to do with like one of the binding concepts of magic is language, as if language is a technology. And but I'm real interested in this brotherhood of light, because most of those concepts that I'm talking about right now come from like Philip K. Dick. I talk about him a lot because I study him a lot. Sorry. But I just did a podcast with Sync Book Radio on Valis, where he's looking for like the fifth Messiah. But a lot of the concepts that he uses in Valis are what this great brotherhood of light thing is, where it's talking about some example. This is a quote from Wicca. Some examples of those believed to be ascended masters would be, according to different unconfirmed sources, the following: Master Jesus, Confucius, Gautama, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Enoch, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch. Okay. So list of messiahs are very interesting. One of the things that Philip K. Dick said in Valis that I had not realized was he talked about the Psalms 04. Psalms 104 is Akhenaten's, what, how do you say his name? Somebody correct my hick ass trying to pronounce.
You're saying Enoch?
Akhenaten?
Akhenaten?
The Egyptian dude. His hymn is Psalms 104 or 105, one of the two.
Cool.
But there's this idea. So, do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, show a picture of the Egyptian.
Where's
Akhenaten was an Egyptian ruler who tried to change Egyptians' idea of polytheism into monotheism. A lot of people have associated him with Moses and have associated him with Jesus as far as his story is concerned. Yeah. But the idea that Philip K. Dick put forth is that his psalm is in his hymn is in the Psalms. This idea that all the Psalms, there's like 180 Psalms. If you read all the Psalms, it would take you 5 damn hours. I've done it multiple times. That's how long it takes. It's a long process to get to the Psalms. But there's certain individuals who have put forth the idea that each Psalm is a thought of a different Christ. That means that there's like 180 of these great brotherhood of the lights. Like, our ideas of how many people have been like sort of assisted through enlightenment, we'll say, is like a long list. And that the idea, like even Jesus said that his doctrine is not his own, which some people haven't translated to mean that he was assisted. There's outside assistance. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's multiple Christ. Christ isn't an individual. Christ is a person who has like an undercover agent for the spiritual realm or whatever. I've done enough talking, God damn it. This is hard to explain.
So yeah, Andreas showed the Wikipedia.
Did a good job explaining it.
For the Great White Brotherhood. Yeah, and they explain it as sort of this kind of new age philosophy or something, but it's actually pretty It's pretty Tibetan. It's pretty Eastern.
And kind of Catholic in a little weird way.
Yeah, because it's all of that. It really kind of
like my mom has communion of saints. It's a pretty common Catholic concept to have when people die. You have like my mom has like a committee in her mind of like the fallen Catholics that help her, right? Like this is a very common Catholic concept. So Tibetan too.
And this, same with Tibetan, same with Thelemic too. You know, Crowley had the Gnostic saints, you know, and it's basically this idea that that, you know, so like first of all, reincarnation is not like a straight line. That's kind of a misnomer. So a soul, whatever that is, can actually have multiple incarnations at once. And it's really kind of more akin to the idea of emanation, right? So one of the like Nyingma Buddhist masters, they can have several different incarnations at once, that they've kind of cast off from themselves, like a Nirman Kai, Dharma Kai, and I forget the other one, but they're basically like different incarnations of a certain soul, and they have different purposes, right? So so if you I mean, it's kind of easiest to look at the Tibetan model because it's pretty neutral to most people. So if you think about that, you know, there's, well, to explain the different bodies, you have like a mind emanation, you have a karma emanation, which is basically, man, I wish Noel was here. He'd know the names to all of it, but it's like an incarnation of their karma. So some karmic job or whatever they're getting out of the way. And then there's also the emanation of the physical body. So when you have those, the person will look almost exactly like their previous incarnation, because it has a lot of that karma. So if you look at the next, what's his name? So Chogyam Trungpa was a writer, and he died, but his reincarnation was recognized, and he obviously did a body emanation, because it looks exactly like that picture, and he's a young man right now. So so it gets really obvious, and sometimes they will do obvious things like that, to, you know, either to bolster faith for their students, you know, their sangha. You know, sometimes it just seems necessary. It's like, you know, Paulin Dorje came back as a good-looking man to kind of gain a little more interest, and he's kind of facing issues right now, because I think when you're doing sort of big jobs like this, where you're helping the world, there's a lot of obstacles. So so I think he's kind of going through that right now, but he's come back to sort of you know, develop further for some future date.
That's interesting. Will sent this link talking about multiple timelines. If you're traveling at faster than the speed of light, experiencing multiple timelines could happen simultaneously, right? So this kind of explains possibly this idea of light experiencing matter as, you know, multiple incarnations at once.
Doesn't that require like an infinite amount of energy?
Isn't that kind of the idea that everything, like matter, is made up of this infinite amount of energy, which is the universe, and so it's all structured. So we're dealing with infinite energy in multiple scenarios of symmetry. Also, photon splitting, right? Splitting photons.
Right. Right. Or photon, like changing photons into their solid state or whatever. But like the actual thing about the timeline thing is that it's a mathematical equation where they decided that it would be, instead of four dimensions, you know, we normally think of 4 dimensions, 3 in space and 1 in time. They hypothesized that once you get to the speed of light, that you'll have 3 within time, but 1 within space. But there's
that's what happens when you drop into a black hole.
I've heard 12 dimensions and 3 phase changes.
When you drop into a black hole, space and time switch places.
Like, yeah, Interstellar or whatever. How he's in 3 different segments of time at the same time, but he's the same. But I mean, you can extrapolate that. Like there's like a fucking part of, I'm sorry about my language, but there's a part in Matthew where it talks about Jesus going to the mountain, and then they like everything turns white, and then there's like Elijah, Moses, and Jesus, and the disciples are like, "Oh my Lord, that's crazy." And but it's basically Philip K. Dick was talking again. Philip K. Dick. He talks about how like they were all 3 of the same person in a way. Get what I'm saying? So it has to do with
this is the kind of thing that blows my mind. Is like your average Protestant can't handle this stuff. Like this is such a Mormon. This is such a Mormon vibe. This idea that Jesus was hanging out with Jedis that are, you know, this is very Qui-Gon Jinn right here. It's Obi-Wan.
Right, exactly. Moses. I mean, it's totally the idea that they put. I mean, the Star Wars talks about prophecy. It deals with dreams. It deals with visions. I mean, all of that, and then this whole idea that there's like one generation teaches another generation that teaches another generation that teaches another generation. Blah 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 blah. That's way far more advanced than what we're used to on a normal timeline. But yeah. That's kind of interesting to me. I don't know if fiction talking a little bit of truth there.
It's usually taking from it,
forfeiting it, or not forfeiting,
taking from it. It's inspired by.
Yeah, I think a lot of fiction is trying to wrestle with things that have happened and make sense of them, and most things don't make sense. Like a lot of the time I'll watch a movie like this doesn't make any sense, and I'll find out years later that was the exact true story or something, and that's why it seems so ridiculous. Badly. Or even maybe it doesn't matter because it's just no matter how you try to make sense of something that actually happens, it doesn't have the same. Like a movie has causation that makes sense.
Yeah, a story a written story has a certain structure that is specifically tailored to the format.
People spend all their whole lives dealing with chaos at work and with their relationships, and then they come home and watch like Detective CSI because it's,
imagine like a story that required like 10 different things that happen at the same time.
But that would stand true even if it wasn't fiction. You get what I'm saying? So if certain narratives have an inevitability, that would be the same as like conspiracies or whatever. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen this. Have you guys seen the He-Man written by Kevin Smith?
I have not, but I'm kind of interested because he does some weird Gnostic stuff, and his Kevin Smith Green Arrow comic where Green Arrow is brought back to life without a soul, and all these Illuminati demon people are trying to take his body so they can put a demon in his body. I mean, Kevin Smith does give him credit where credit's due. That was pretty cool, but I don't know what he did with He-Man.
If you can power through, it's pretty cool, but there are certain stumbling blocks as far as like pandering. I guess the best way to say it, pandering goes.
Something and.
I mean, you better pander if you're going to make this like Aryan superhero. Unless like He-Man's black, you're going to have to pander.
Immediately He-Man dies. It becomes all about Teela and a bunch of the females going through the jungle talking about how men are dangerous. If you can get past that, it turns into like Dragon Ball Z. But it's definitely kind of formatted, I guess you could say. and it's not very good. So don't like come back to me and be like, Will, I'll never trust your opinion again because I got a dopamine problem. Everything's good to me.
You ruined He-Man. What about Elizabeth Clare Prophet? I saw that Elizabeth Clare Prophet considered herself part of the White Brotherhood, and she's interesting from the Summit Lighthouse Church Universal and Triumphant. You know what I mean? You know about her?
So I'm friends with her son.
Really? Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me talking about it, but we've had some conversations about like, you know, if I thought it was kind of legitimate what she was doing, because she definitely built quite a community.
Yeah, she seems kind of based actually. Like every video I've seen of her, I like the video.
Well, so like, you know, here's the thing with mediums, right? It takes first of all, women are naturally gifted at it. That's why you have Annie Besant and you know Blavatsky and everything.
Maria Orsic, numbers of female mediums throughout history, right?
Yeah, Maria Orsic. They're just naturally good at that. So it's like the Scarlet Women, right? So the thing is, though, is it takes quite a toll on their health, right? And it can also sort of wane, right? So Blavatsky got in trouble with kind of faking it towards the end of her life because she just couldn't physically capacitate kind of going into that state anymore. So so I think she kind of discredited herself by sort of cheating a little bit. Now with other mediums like Annie Besant or Elizabeth Clare Prophet, I think they might have gotten a few sort of genuine communications, and I actually think there's some good evidence that that they were most likely Tibetan. Elizabeth Clare Prophet's thing was with Saint Germain, and you know, I think, you know, it's within the realm of possibilities, but if you're trying to piece together, you know, a whole system and like build a community around that, it's kind of sketchy ground, right? So it's not
Like
even
cult ground.
what's that?
Like cult ground, you mean? That's why it seems sketchy.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem, because if what makes the difference here is she probably was not receiving sadhana, you know, practices to do, and that's kind of the whole point.
What were these people's goals? Like, what were they like?
Which
Was their
people?
operation in the earthly realm?
You talking about the Theosophics? Talking about Elizabeth Clare Prophet? Or are you talking about the Tibetan monks 100 years
The
ago?
ones we were just going over, the Clare Prophet and all that.
So Elizabeth Clare Prophet, she was a student, I think, of Annie Besant. So Annie Besant was a student of Blavatsky. Blavatsky was a natural talent, and Annie Besant was her talented student. So she kind of brought her, you know,
1922.
trained her, and basically, you know, it's like a tradition of mediumship that was kind of passed between them, and you know, Elizabeth Clare Prophet had her own thing. And then there's also Annie Bailey, who had some really interesting stuff, from the Irish pub. That's the one. No, she had some interesting stuff that I think she was actually receiving.
You totally tripped me up. I was like, I know he means Alice Bailey. All right, I feel
Alice
better now.
Bailey.
It's okay.
Yeah. But to make it really clear,
Oh snap! Alice Ann Bailey. Her middle name is Ann. Dude, you win too. That's
Hey,
I have
all
a
right.
friend
AB.
that
I'm
knows a lot about
resending.
this lady right here.
I got a dozen or so of her books on the shelf above me.
That bitch has been zapped by a laser, guaranteed. Look at her whole hair is like blown back. That's like Bride of Frankenstein original artwork right there.
She's just
Just
wearing her hair
kind of
wrong.
Marge Simpson her a little bit.
She has an
And,
interesting, series. One of them, the Treatise on White Magic.
this
Yeah.
She
is
has a
yeah,
whole
this is all the
the
all
the
that
Lucis
Aleister
Trust.
Crowley time period.
This is a little
Yeah.
post Crowley, right? Well, I guess it's also current, but this is its own. In a lot of ways, the United Nations bases its ideology on the Lucis Trust, which was Alison Foster Bailey's books.
Say what?
How so?
Really? The
Interesting.
UN?
Yeah,
You said?
elaborate on that. That's a cool point.
Lucis Trust United Nations. If you type in Lucis Trust United Nations, you can find the first off the Great Invocation of the United Nations. They had like a prayer in 1940 whatever, and it was the Lucis Trust commended the prayer. There's also the Lucis Trust room in the United Nations,
Oh yeah,
which is this altar. This is the room. The Lucis Trust altar is like a big stone, and you know the rules with altars, right? Uncut stone. Here's cut stone. All that.
yeah.
So
With
you
the
think there's something
sun, the
about the
moon,
spiritual movement
Saturn.
The
that
there's
staff
definitely-
of Mercury.
They're definitely
How?
the Lucis Trust was really important to the United Nations because most of the
It's
people who
also-
were in the United Nations were into theosophism, and so they were saying, "Hey, we're going to bring forth this better peace through a united order. This is going to be better than the League of Nations. We're going to have, a united, alliance of sovereigns that run the nations." And they started out with this great invocation where they prayed to not the unknown God, but the God whose name that has many names known by all of the nations, right? And all of these different alignments to, Lucis Trust people associate with Lucifer, but there's also a different connotation of what they believe Lucifer is.
It's a Promethean idea. It has to do with the idea of individuals trying to bring man to godhood through technology or finance or some shit like that.
Where did this
It-
take
it-
place? Because the United Nations kind of has a history, like in San Francisco.
Yeah,
also
so
in
the Great
Europe,
Invocation,
Europe.
the Great Invocation happened in San Francisco.
Cool.
United Nations Great Invocation.
San
The
Francisco
Great
is kind of a
Invocation.
hotbed of occult activity, and San Francisco Bay Area has one of the largest Egyptian collections in the entire world.
Right, the Rosicrucians. So on World Invocation
And City
Day,
College.
1952, pioneering force of the passage of the Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations wife of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt recorded a brief message which included the Great Invocation. And you can listen to the Great Invocation here, right? Which is again found through the Lucis Trust. So they're tied right to the beginning of oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't even showing you that. Here's lucistrust.org. Eleanor Roosevelt reads the Great Invocation. Look how big it is, first off.
Wow.
That's like their printer. And then you can listen to it here, but today is World Invocation Day. You can find it there. But yeah, they've constantly been. That's the thing. It seems interesting to me that they're all about white magic, the White Brotherhood. They want to be the good guys and practice magic. What's that?
She sounds kind of like an inspirational. The book I'm holding right here is an inspirational speaker for Thomas J. Watson. Thomas J. Watson created IBM, but this guy, Walter Russell, he has some interesting like art in here. This was done in like the early 1900s. Like every page has like pretty interesting illustration of sciences, and some of it's correct and some of it's not, and some of it is making assumptions, but it was done in 1901. It's called The Universal One by Walter Russell. Interesting piece to have just to look at, kind of like a coffee table piece. But yeah, he was hired by Thomas J. Watson, the founder of IBM, to be a speaker.
Technically, IBM was Central Tabulating Recording Company, CTR, and then they changed their name under Watson when they started doing international business machines in 1924. So about, 13 years crazy to see how it started as like a typewriter and cash register company for the Old West.
That makes sense. I mean, they were pretty much
Do we
just data
see the guy?
retrieval.
What needed computing, and it's money, right?
Yeah, especially for census work once they started doing the machines for the census. But yeah, I know. I think it's interesting, like the Theosophical Society's association with the elite. With what do you think about that?
Yeah,
I think people just have an interest in these things, but don't make like, you know, don't mythologize them into being like these big heavy hitters. You know, I think people find interest in stuff like, you know, like Alice Bailey's stuff, or, you know, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, but it doesn't mean that those people kind of know what they're doing. Or even Alice Bailey herself or anything like that. But there's kind of like different. It's important to kind of classify these things, right? So like it's like in Christianity, they make it really clear, like, you know, you have the congregation that doesn't practice anything, but you're supposed to have priests who are basically in retreat all the time, as mediaries. They're supposed to be achieving something and then passing it on to people. So in general, I think when people claim a religion, they're saying this is what I think is true. Um, and that's great, but like, I don't know, beliefs get boring after a while. It's really like, um, who does the practice and what are they doing? And what are they bringing to the religion? Those are the people that are interesting, in my opinion.
So you
So
got all these characters that pretend to be, well, I don't know if they pretend to be, but they're acting like the good guys. You know, hey, I'm in the white brotherhood. I think white means good, so I'm gonna try to do what I can to help people. If that means killing some people to alleviate karma. Versus you got like Aleister Crowley, right? Like, and even the Lucis Trust. All these groups have kind of separated themselves from Crowley, but at the same time, Crowley's still a hugely important figure, right? And he did not pretend to be the good guy. You know, didn't pretend to be some sort of altruistic character. So like all holds bar on, you know, honesty. Like, what do you think about that? Like the Crowley the Crowley part of the 20th century and how that affects this, you know, these our belief in these fake altruistic elite.
At least Curly was earnest about it. Like,
So
if you're gonna be selfish and that's your goal, then do it. Rather than having
he
somebody
wasn't
paint all the bullshit around it, like, oh no, what we're doing is actually good for other people. I care about some other soul rather than my own doing.
I can immediately see Sean's sympathy, but
He's
so
not lying to you.
so the thing about Crowley, is like he really was not that nefarious of a figure, but he kind of wore that, as, you know, um
He didn't deny his manhood.
there's a really so well, he certainly didn't do that. He'd be willing to show it off if you challenged
If
him.
you
It
whether
wasn't
you
a
asked or
euphemism, but
not.
okay.
But, you know, to kind of be mature about Crowley is to understand that his main goal was to follow what he was told in the book of the law, and he didn't like it at first. And a lot of what we hear about Crowley were, I think it was a period of like 5 or 10 years of his life where, you know, he basically was really, like, I wouldn't
it's like
say
LBJ.
he was
Sorry.
he was kind of like, you know, he kind of rejected, like, when he after he had received the book of the law, he was disgusted with it, and it stayed in his attic for, I think, 4 years after that, and then his maid found it and brought it back to his attention. But he was not really so willing do it. I mean, if you read the book of the law, there's a point where in the second chapter, you can see Iwas speaking directly to him, saying, I can see thee hate the hand and the pen, but I am stronger. So what Crowley was doing in that moment was receiving from a master,
What he did
from,
not want.
well, let me finish, from the Great White Brotherhood. And he was acting as a treasure revealer, right? So if we just talked about Anne Bailey, right? Alice Bailey and Annie Besant, they're all mediums, right? Let's say they're here. Then you have treasure revealers, right? In Tibet, they're called Turtans, right? Turtan, right? They are essentially like talented clairvoyants that receive practices and whole books and everything like that. Turtan.
They believe themselves to be here for the benefit of others.
They are here for receiving works from.
You also believe they're here for the benefit of others.
You believe they aren't. You know,
I believe they're here for the benefit of themselves, and if you engage with them correctly, you can get benefit from it.
well, I mean, you'd have to be more specific from what are you doing?
I think that they're lying. If they really think they're here for the benefit of others, they're lying to themselves and others. They're here for their own benefit, and they can enjoy that as much as they want, but they're not going to intrinsically do anything for anyone else. Even if you were to grab a cab on the street on the side of New York, on the sidewalk in New York, and then you see an old woman who is perhaps not able to walk as well as you, if you were to give that cab to her, you're still doing it to earn your own ability to sleep with yourself at night. You're not doing it for her.
No, I don't agree with that. See,
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I feel like even if you're
That's
breathing,
fine.
like,
If
even
you took that
if you-
cab, you would not be able to sleep with yourself at night. That's why you give it up.
not necessarily.
so
I don't think
you're
so.
you're talking about civic duty, right? That's like
Form of magic, yeah.
that's
One
like
of the
the
most
bottom
important ones,
line
actually.
of human experience is civic duty, right? That's the basics of being a person.
Well, if you fail in your civic duty and then you can sleep at night just fine afterward, then you can take the cab. But if you can't sleep at night afterward, then you better not do that to yourself. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of heartburn.
That being said, that's great ethics for everybody else, but
I would give the
there's
cab up.
also-
I would
so
never.
there's a classification of people who have occult events happen to them, and they then bear the responsibility of that. And
Do you think
it's
that
kind
people
of a
aren't
privilege.
animals?
I'll just say it's a privilege to not have to believe in those things.
Like karmic ties
Bitter to the belly.
I think the
psychic
privilege is
responsibility.
illusory. Like, if it's a privilege for a cat to live in a house, that's not what the universe is.
Oh,
But
the universe, that's a
man,
lot. That's like actually a great example. The universe is kind of like
magic
a house
is
the cat gets to live in.
moral. Like magic is amoral by definition. Like
That
if
might
you're
be the
trying
best
Is or is
example
not?
of
I'm
the
sorry.
meaning of
Wait.
life.
I want to know if that's a positive or a negative statement there.
Which one?
I mean that's
Magic
what the
is
whole
amoral
that's
or
what
magic
the
is
whole
not amoral?
dichotomy of like white magic and dark magic and all of that shit is about. Like the fact that like Crowley said it himself, like even a potato farmer is a
Exactly,
magician
Crowley.
because you're making an effect on the outside world. Like all
So
of that has to do with that premise of what's happening inside. Like you have things that happen inside. There's a voice inside your head that none of us hear. So
I
the
wouldn't be
voice inside your head
doing
is
that either.
basically spiritual world, and everything external is reality.
I've learned to transmit that voice. I can say things
If
without
you
saying them.
can make that voice have an effect on the outside world, if you can make that internal voice change what's happening in reality, that's called magic.
See, I
Right,
also
but
say
you're only
earlier,
doing
like
it
in
to
terms of
yourself.
you're talking about like you're talking about selfishness and utilitarianism. If I decide I want to, if I plant a bunch of trees right here out of selfishness, and now I've got this big redwood forest, and it's consuming all the carbon monoxide and giving life, and there's places for birds and fish, and like we create an ecosystem because of it.
More
and I'm
nitrogen.
breathing. And I'm breathing
Because
better.
you like to think of yourself as the type of person who would do such a thing, and that
No,
amount of
I
intrinsic
mean,
satisfaction is enough
I
for you to
definitely-
perform the work.
I definitely, as like a 5-year-old kid, did not think about any of that stuff when planting trees. I was just like, I mean, I kind of, the only thing I thought of is
you
trees
were
are kind of like
literally-
people. They deserve
There was
to
no
be, like-
virtue or anything involved. You were literally just performing your true will because you enjoyed the concept of planting a seed.
And because I thought like trees are like people, and I want people to live, I want trees to live too. But like there's a point is
Yeah,
that
it gave you an
there's
intrinsic satisfaction right here.
yeah, but it also helps out the ecosystem, the nitrogenation,
Not why
everything
you
else
did
that's
it, though.
happening.
If you didn't feel something here, you wouldn't have done it.
I mean,
No,
I
like,
think the
Sean's
idea
onto
that
something.
your
Sean's
hormonal
onto something.
I think your hormonal response though might be voyeurism and cuckism. You might be cuckolding yourself because you're just experiencing.
Whoa. Just because he's saying that he feels fucking pleasure out of being moral doesn't mean that
It doesn't mean that pleasure. No, it does.
moral.
It doesn't necessarily mean that pleasure is a choice. It could be that the response of your atoms flying forward because of cataclysmic bombardment are leading to you feeling like this is the right thing to happen. Because it would suck if you didn't.
Can I address the elephant in the room here?
Feeling.
Yeah.
Can I address the elephant in the room here about how you guys are talking about karma and you guys talk about doing the right thing, but then also like, how do you know like just living your life and not giving that cab up to old lady? I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but you don't give that cab up to that old lady, and maybe that old lady deserved that. I'm not saying she
Because
does.
that old lady was Madame
obviously the old
Blavatsky.
lady. Give the cab to the old lady.
No,
but
you know
how
what?
do you know
Most
her
old ladies,
karmic-
if they made it that far, it's probably, especially the Russian ones, like they hurt somebody to get that far. So
exactly.
She goes on to invent COVID.
Yeah.
don't just trust old ladies,
No, but that's interesting though, because there is a limited amount of information you can gain, and sometimes that limited amount of information will give you the wrong feeling, like maybe something bad will happen because you did what you saw as the right thing. But that's not really what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is, in that moment, are you doing what you see as what would cause you pain in the future, or are you avoiding that?
Clairvoyance would just, I would assume, be the connection between the way you perceive time, the way you perceive reality, and how it actually happens. Because there's a quantum time there, and then there's like actual like short scale time, like smaller than a second, like microseconds and stuff like that. And then there's that's where your brain can actually comprehend things in like nanoseconds. But then there's
Plus,
even
I
time
think-
that's smaller scale than that, and that's like the clairvoyance connection right there.
Plus, I think people just in general are willing to sacrifice their morals or their selfishness, either way, one for the other, because we're not driven by one system or another system. We have a series of priority-driven patterns that we stack, and so there'll be a moment where you're saying to yourself, "What is right?" And I've seen and I've heard of so many people killing
What can
and
I
dying.
live with?
So many people
Discard
killed and
the
died
concept
for
of
what
right
they
and wrong.
No, but more people have killed and died over what they think is right and wrong than anything else. They've sacrificed their religious values over that every single time. So right and wrong does, I mean, at least emotionally, play into more than just what you feel is going to be good for you.
Yeah, but right and wrong imparts what I can live with and what I cannot live with.
No, I mean, like, I think that's a
rule upon the
super American idea that dying is the worst thing that can
I
happen to
don't.
you.
I think
Dying
that's
is not
the
the worst thing
William
that can happen to you.
Wallace idea,
Dying,
bro.
you're about to be willing to die. You got to figure out what you're. It used to be you figure out what you were willing to die for. That used to be a normal way to think about life.
FDR said
But I mean-
he'd rather die a free man than live a slave. Live a life as a slave.
Right.
great.
I mean, that's like that. The whole thing, though, is whether or not your time span is allowing on you to actually live to what you want to do. I mean, and then
you're
the
allowed to
whole
live.
idea
You're here
of
breathing.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of being a Christ or whatever, a part of the like white brotherhood, is how much of that you can sacrifice in the act of saving others or whatnot. But that's almost
that's
like
what
a
you
vain
feel
concept.
doing.
Can you even save anybody? I mean, the whole reason people get selfish on what they want to do in life is because they realize that nobody else is going to fucking do it for them. So they got to do it themselves. So they got to focus on themselves, because otherwise they ain't going to happen. You know what I mean? Like everybody goes through this. This is what's called a midlife crisis. Everybody does this.
Well, does the UN and all of these white brotherhood whatever organizations, do they help people achieve their true will, or do they stand in the way of normal people achieving their true will?
Well, you gotta imagine what normal people were like at one point. They didn't have access to education or electricity or, the
I'm
ability to
talking about
travel.
here and now,
Yeah, I'm talking about right
2024.
now in this civilization that's been created, you have
Are they
access
are they
to.
furthering their goal, supposed goal, or are they subverting it?
I mean, clearly education and everything is messed up, but with social media, people are able to, if they want to, pursue the information they want to pursue. So I mean, they're you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. People either like lie in the streets with crap all over them, or they'll lie in the streets looking at their iPhones of TikTok. But you can't save everybody. You can at least make it so that you could use those devices, and people have access to every library in the world if they really
I
wanted
don't think
to.
you can save anyone. People can only save themselves.
Well, that's
If
true, but you
if
can
you
give
remove
people
Well,
their
what if you're
tools.
agency, then you
judged on
remove their
how many
ability
people
to
you
either
save? Like fucking speculative.
That is a very white brotherhood
speaking.
thing. You're supposed to save people. Is that right, James? That you're supposed
Yeah,
to
that's
save
the whole
people?
point.
Mm,
That's the whole
no,
point. Is
so
this isn't
so
coming
okay.
from them. This is coming from other sources that
One
are
second.
trying to
But
save
if they
people.
subvert the agency of another people, are those people truly being saved, or are they just being sustained?
Hold
Led
on,
astray.
let's hear James for a second, 'cause he's patient as hell. I can't believe it.
Okay. So there's a bunch of ideas kind of floating around in the air right now. One is you're talking about the salvific qualities in religion or spirituality. That's a whole subject. The salvific chain of emanation is like Dionysos, Jesus, Krishna, um, all these prophets come from that same light. They say as much. Um, you know, that's a whole aspect of creation, if you will, that um, it's an embodiment of mercy in the physical world. But if you don't have on your radar um, the noetic goals of practicing religion or meditation or magic or mysticism at all, then you're kind of missing the whole thing, right?
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by noetic goals?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
So noetic basically means like noesis, right? Which is coming to know something, right? It's not gnosis, but noesis. Gnosis is a noetic experience, right? Um, so
Gotcha.
so these are it's there's spiritual phenomenon that happen from practice or from contemplation. Contemplation is a practice too, but that's like um, s- you know senior high. That's high practice. If you can reach something through contemplation, then that's really high character, right? Um, for everybody else that's not like Ramana Maharshi, who sees his dead uncle and gets so afraid of death that he thinks himself into like beyond gnosis, like henosis, uh, then you have to have practice, right? So so salvation or the salvific chain of creation is anything that brings to the world more opportunities to take your life, your chance at life, to have one of those noetic experiences, because they never leave you after that, right? This is why in Tibet you have this tradition where they recognize their rinpoches lifetime after lifetime, and they train them, and basically every time they come back, they reach the first landmark faster and faster and faster at a younger and younger age, right? That landmark, that first landmark, is samadhi, right? That
Okay.
if you have not had this experience, everything that you do below it is all thaumaturgy, right? anything that you do towards this goal, which is the starting point, right? You're not
So there's
even
like a gate
in
that's being
there,
kept.
you're not
I
in
love
the
these ideas.
you're not in the cast until you've reached um, these states, right? And then from there, you have to develop it, right? So if you look at
What's thaumaturgy? Is that so? It says miracle working or wonder working. What's the difference between that and samadhi? Can you explain that a little bit harder?
so there so they're kind of two different ideas there. Samadhi is a mystic attainment.
Right.
Thaumaturgy is magic, right? Thaumaturgy is magic for any other purpose than um like divine works. So like where you're invoking gods, or you're giving offerings, those are all kind of classified as theurgy. If you want a better job, or you want that girl to like you, or any of that stupid human crap, then thaumaturgy is what you're doing. But also
Apparently, I'm good at that one.
well, good for you, because maybe you can use it to heal somebody someday. And that's what thaumaturgy would be used for, right?
In a
So like
positive way, yeah.
so like however
I
you
hope
use
so.
that is the boat you're making to ride. It's the bed that you're making for the future. So thaumaturgy, while anybody can do it, it's kind of better in the hands of somebody who's had the samadhi experience, who is, at least they've got their foot in the door for enlightenment. Because after that, you have what's called enlightened activity, which is where you have a master that doesn't give a shit about how much money he makes, doesn't need pussy, doesn't care about living in a house. He's perfectly happy in a cave with his rags, whatever. And he comes down from his samadhi that he's been in for months to heal a student who's supposed to do something important. That's what white magic is, right? So Crowley's definition comes from earlier in his lifetime, right? The one that everybody uses, where somebody playing golf is doing magic because he's making the golf ball, go in the ground, pussy, right? So that's pretty magical if that did something for your soul, but it doesn't necessarily, right? So if you so Crowley's so misunderstood. If you really want to understand Crowley, you have to understand that old Crowley thinks young Crowley is full of shit, right? Including Crowley's thing about how the demons of the Goetia, which they're not really demons, they're just spirits, right? The spirits of the
David.
Goetia are psychological beings, right? That they're aspects of your own mind. Later Crowley is like, that's a load of shit, you know. It's not an aspect of my mind that has caused problems and can affect the health of people around you, or cause chaos in your life, or whatever. So it's just not true, um, and I think you'll find the same mistake that young Crowley was making there. I think you'll find that same mistake in almost all modern practitioners, where they kind of treat these things as though they're psychological self-help tools, or that they're not actually really real magic. It's just physics and science and technology, but we just don't understand how it works.
How
Yeah,
are
a
those
lot of
things
time.
not real magic?
No, it's not that he's not saying that. It's just like a lot of people will say it's in your head, basically, but that's okay. Like, oh, you can work with it. Most of the people that are okay with working with this stuff will say, oh, just use sigil magic because it's Gestalt process, and your mind will put together the symbols, and you'll eventually realize. And it's they've made it into a very humanist, practical way that's approachable. And that's great to an extent because it's not so scary to people. But that's the same problem with every religion. Then I mean, Christianity's done the same thing. We've walked it into a very weak place where it doesn't have the same power it used to.
Yeah, it's got no balls because it's mechanistic, right? It thinks
the universe is dumb.
Exactly. And that it can't change, that it's a machine. It's already cast. And it doesn't change. It's exactly deterministic.
No, it's constantly annealing itself with each moment.
And people will separate it because, like Galileo's error, like, well, they'll say, okay, science and religion can't really see each other eye to eye, so let's not even try.
And that's also a load of BS, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a true statement.
They are not a dichotomy at all. Just not at all. They're actually going from two different directions, right? Science has to start from the bottom because it has
I have a question for you.
Right? So what are you going to
recordings of observations?
And you have to attach that to your senses eventually, right? That's how we decide what objective experience is that we have a shared space of sensorial experience. But you'll find that that's not the most important thing to you in your life, right? Except, good sensual experiences would be the top thing.
Those get boring fast.
It's actually the subjective experience that matters to you the most. Like when you road rage, right? It's not because your car is, behind another car. It's because you want to be somewhere else, right? That's not a material, that's not a material thing, right? So your subjective experience is the realm where you're experiencing spiritual practice, right? Or spiritual attainment. So science does not explain your subjective experience. It's only going to explain your material experience. Now that starts to change with quantum physics, right? That's what's so interesting about it, right? Because it's starting to break these sort of laws of physics that we have built, whole foundations of science on. But the assumption is that that's all there is, or that, it's like that one guest on the Joe Rogan podcast. I didn't see the full thing, but I saw a clip, and he's like, if I had a soul and we looked in my arm, we'd find an atom for the soul in my arm. But
that's fucking retarded, honestly.
It's midi-chlorians.
Propositions made by religion are completely scientifically unfalsifiable, meaning that you're going to have two mutually exclusive propositions, one of which is probably going to be more interesting than the other, but both are logically sound in
I don't know. I don't think that's the problem at all, actually. So eventually we will be able to measure things very well. But the problem is, that joke, that riddle joke?
You can't measure a spirit.
Check this out. You totally can. We just don't know how we're doing it yet. But that's the thing. The idea that we can't do something, we've proven we can do anything. So I just don't agree.
Well,
I'm not sure how to do
regardless of whether or not we will prove it in the future. As long as it's not proved, then we haven't gotten it within our.
That's the Galileo error. That's why religion's able to go off pretending to not be science, and science is able to pretend that religion doesn't exist.
There are going to be Gestalt unfalsifiable propositions that certain things depend on.
Okay, so there's Jack and Jill.
You cannot prove the voice in your head if you.
I have a quick question for everyone.
All right, but then I'm doing my riddle. Okay.
So I wanted to ask about the concept of Gosha from Aleister Crowley, because I just came upon that word, and it's an Indian word, and it's derived of being of a woman. I was just curious where the term Gosha from Aleister Crowley comes from. Is that an occult thing, or is that just something that he made?
As far as I understand, it's a collection of spiritual practice.
You're
whether
saying
or not it's in a book or in a life.
You're trying to
Moesha?
the Goetia, right?
Yeah. Is that a concept greater than Aleister Crowley, or is that just Aleister Crowley's concept?
I'm pretty
So
sure it
If
goes
you're
back.
saying greater and less than, you're evaluating.
Goetia is supposed to be of Solomon, right? Solomon had his Goetia, right? Isn't that
Yeah,
the deal?
It's a
you-
collection.
so the Goetia are it's a collection of evocations for the spirits who apparently helped King Solomon build his temple, right? So why this would be around is probably due to a lot of Masons keeping it around. I think this is kind of their their sort of central thing is that they have inherited and kept and procured
At
basically
very least, it's far older than Aleister Crowley, right? Like that's the
right.
point.
So
Okay,
that's
so there's a
that's older.
He didn't create these things.
Yeah, actually,
So-
John Dee was using these things in the 1600s. Was using Solomon squares. Solomon squares are for divination practices, and you'll find very similar things in Tibet. This if just looking at this, you have to imagine what you're looking at is a launch pad for a rocket ship, and you're going to find this exact model all over the world in different cultures for religious purposes.
Geometrically balanced.
I want to make a point that there's a word that has the same pronunciation as this word, but it's an Indian word, but it's spelled Gosha, and it's in the definition of that word Gosha is being derived from a female. And it's interesting because that kind of plays into the yin yang duality concept, and also back into how someone here was just a little while ago saying that females have a nuance to being a clairvoyant or more in tune with these senses.
Gosha is also in Sharia law. Gosha women are women that wear the hijab.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know that word Gosha.
It's not the same. This is kind of a rhyme, but we do that here.
Cognate.
Well, there's a connection between the English world and the Indian world.
Oh,
just
definitely in terms
yeah.
of the Germanic root word sounding similar to an Indo-European Sanskrit word. There's something there. It's worth saying. But I just also think the way it's pronounced, I've always pronounced it Goetia, which I don't know if that's right. It's probably more like Gotia, like Gotia or Gotia. But
Yeah, it's like that T that's schwat out.
yeah, or a D turned into a D. But I mean, that doesn't mean anything either because people pronounce things in different cultures. They go to Argentina and you can hear people pronounce D as V or B,
and words are spelled out, and spells like magic, right?
Okay, so there's Jack and Jill.
Spelling is magic.
Jack and Jill.
That word
All right,
spells
so-
exactly the same.
So Jack and Jill are lying on the floor dead next to some shattered glass, and there's just water everywhere, and a baseball, I think, is the deal on the floor. And how did this happen?
Yes.
That's the whole thing.
There's one way this went down. There's only one way. I remember hearing this like as a very young
Okay.
child.
There's a
We're
lot
science
going on
here.
tonight. You're gonna have to repeat that. What?
All right. So
How did they die?
you're a quantum detective. You show up and you find that Jack and Jill are lying on the floor dead next to shattered glass, a baseball, there's just water everywhere.
Did they drown or they at sea and they just happen to be next to those things?
They were looking in the fish tank together. They fell in. A nice baseball player was walking by, noticed them drowning, and threw a fucking curveball, made it through the window,
Oh,
smashed the thing. They both
getting
died and drowned anyway.
Jack and Jill are fish. They
Is
were
it
in
a-
the
is
fish
it a-
tank.
I
Jack
knew
and
it.
Jill were fish. They died in the fish tank when the fish tank
Existential.
shattered. But the thing is, with the data that you have, like you don't know what exactly happened in that room, the exact scenarios that went down in the lives of Jack and Jill, or where
I've
that
never
ball
met
came
a fish
from.
named Jill.
You know
I
what's
was going to
interesting?
ask you
I
if
did
it
a
was a joke or if it was an existential question.
This is
It's
a
both.
both example.
Both
They
are
asked-
very
I remember
common.
that when I was like
Migraine.
5. They told
Yeah.
me that
There's a
one.
lot
but-
of correlation between jokes an existential understanding.
That's true. You know, why did the chicken cross the road? Because he got hit by a car. He was committing suicide. He got to the other side. That whole
The
thing.
Why
chicken
did
in the
Princess Diana
egg
cross
is
the
messed
like
up.
road?
the all-time joke and the existential question at the same time.
It's messed
like,
up that they tell that to kids. Like kids don't get talk about telling jokes that are above kids' pay grade. Like the chicken joke is
the
messed
chicken
up.
and the chicken and crossing the road is like the all-time greatest joke ever.
Well, so
I
what's
I didn't
interesting
figure that
about
shit
what
out
you-
till I was 30.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
it
one
sounds
sticks
like
around.
an anti-joke. It's like, oh, of course, but wait.
That was everyone's first joke, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Other than laughing from someone hitting their head as a baby, right? Like you as a baby, you see
Right.
someone hit their head, you laugh.
See, I think slapstick is like the most natural humor because it's basically like souls laughing at bodies because they're just,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
like,
because
Humorous version of
immediately it's
Shrek.
like that would suck.
ragdoll physics is actually kind of funny.
It's true. The Three
Yeah.
Stooges is the most popular show in the world. Actually, like you go to the third world and the fourth world. There's
Dude,
still shown in
Harpo
Samoa and Malaysia.
Harpo
Right,
But
Marx-
going back to
Marx
what we were saying earlier, I really think that if someone is trying to present themselves as having the goal of just helping others and that's all they want to do, that's someone you really should be very suspicious of. If someone is earnest about their own selfishness and just happens to be helping people constantly and never really hurts anyone, those are the people you should trust. Those are the people
think
they'll look in the eye and they'll say, I'm a bastard, but here, I'll buy you a beer.
Well, that's what they say. If you see the Buddha on the road, kill him, because
Right.
the Buddha's probably pretty annoyed that you haven't gotten to the other side yet. He's spending all of his life over and over again just trying to get you to, like herding cats.
That's like
It's
the
like,
whole
if the Buddha
book of
sees you on the street, he's
Siddhartha.
probably going to ask you, why do you see me here instead of in yourself?
Yeah, that's also important. We should talk about the difference between the salvation model and the proactive model. But Meta, you were about to say something?
No, do you guys know who, I might be saying his name incorrectly, but Hermann Hesse, he wrote a book called Siddhartha. But Siddhartha is the name of Buddha, but
Yeah,
it's about a guy
found
named Siddhartha who goes out and finds Buddha. And then when he gets to Buddha, he's like a pain in Buddha's ass. It's kind of funny because it's like the whole idea of like, if you meet the Buddha on the street, you are the Buddha, so to speak. I mean, it's
Well,
the same
so-
kind of concept. Once
close.
again, we've gone full circle here.
I am you and you are me. Yeah.
So the story
Great
of
song.
the story of Siddhartha, I think it's actually I think it's his version of the lifetime before the Buddha, right? So the lifetime before, the soul who was to be the Buddha, the capital B Buddha, he was a Brahmin and he was an ascetic. And this is a great example, actually perfect example of karma. He was living alone in the woods, having become a Brahmin monk, or basically renouncing all of that, and his final renunciation was being in the woods alone, and obviously practicing and being an ascetic. But his final act of compassion was seeing a family of lions. I think it was it was either tigers or mountain lions, and it was a mother and two cubs, and they were starving. And out of compassion for them, he laid down his body and he let them eat him. And that's how he died. Well, his next incarnation was as Gautama Buddha. He was born as a prince, had everything handed to him, had a perfect life, had a wife, had a child, and that was based on the merit of his sacrifice, the most incredible, selfless act. Nature crowned that with giving him the life of being Gautama Buddha, which he
I'd rather
eventually.
be reincarnated as a street rat than be tossed a treat from a cosmic entity.
No,
You
but it's not. It's not.
Probably
It's not really. Yeah, but it's not a treat. That's the thing you understand. Like Buddha, like Siddhartha, experienced like think about people who can't feel pain, right? Like the confusion that you have of not seeing suffering, and then to be a monk in isolation that's broken by their first temptation, like the kinds of lifestyle that you go through when you first see, you're shocked by this, you know, it's not a good scenario to be raised perfectly as a prince. And like this is his father's ideal, right? Not necessarily his ideal. He didn't pick
Still
this.
was presented as a reward.
So his father made basically made the kingdom so that the Buddha would grow up never knowing what sickness was, never seeing old age, never seeing death, never seeing pain or suffering at all.
Which then builds your ideals, right? Like that's what you want everyone to share in
Or lack
nirvana.
thereof,
Right.
perfectly innocent rather than virtuous.
So what happened was he was taken out in you know his chariot one day, and he saw an old man, and he had never seen that before. And he was like, what was that? It was either that or somebody that was sick. And they scurried that person away, and he was like, wait a second, what
It was
was
someone
that?
who couldn't walk right.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly. That's probably right.
All of those sound like versions I've heard.
Yeah, that's the
What
thing
is a
with
cane?
heaven. It's
Why does he
probably-
have a stick? That's
Well,
not
just
a
the idea.
scepter.
I think also just seeing a guy with white hair, seeing a guy who's old, that's enough. Like he's like, wait a second, people age. You know, people don't
Yeah.
have to keep this forever. It's not permanent.
Not
he
everybody's getting
snuck out.
blowjobs.
Nobody did. They didn't bathe back then.
Well, I wouldn't be so sure, but
Yeah, the Ganges River, dude, all the time.
Somebody's getting a blowjob. It doesn't matter if they're bathed or not.
yeah,
Can we
back to
just
Buddha.
take
Egyptians
context
did.
of that for a second? People didn't bathe for a long time, and then we started. So we've probably all had better.
No,
track
there's
records than
only
most
there's
kings.
only a brief period of a few centuries in Europe that people stopped bathing. For the most part, Moorish bathhouses existed for thousands of years. Asia was constantly in bathing. South America, when the conquistadors showed up, you think that the natives
Not like
weren't
having
clean?
a bathroom next to your bedroom where you can, before you even walk out of the house, clean yourself off. You know what I mean?
Trust me,
Sometimes I
swimming,
take a shower without even taking my shirt off.
swimming.
I mean, the
in, like,
Romans
ba-
shared poop sticks.
swimming the Baylan River and all of these clean places. I feel way better in like springs and geysers in
We have
Banos
gone
and
so far away from the subject of Buddha.
I'm just
right
saying
now.
that, like, if you don't think there was better hygiene before the,
Buddha ever took a
collapse,
shower with his shirt on?
and then you've got oils. You got oils, and you have oil skin scrapers. All right, you're telling me the Prince didn't have skin scrapers with all kinds of oils? I'm done.
The Agaris would like to have a word with you.
Agori.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
The Agaris, sorry. I just watched that documentary that the
Reincarnated as a
CNN
street
guy did.
rat, huh?
Pretty sure this guy was clean. I mean, it's sad but true, bro. Like he's cleaner than you will ever. And no, and he didn't even have to rub the Dove products on his skin.
Every
Well,
single
so-
one was he goes to wipe and it's perfectly white.
No, it's the wrong hand.
So to finish the story, though, just to keep it complete, he snuck out
Well,
and he saw sickness and death, saw like prostitutes and saw all these things, and and then he basically that motivated him to find the solve suffering. So the end.
Well, solving suffering seems like such a hard thing. I mean, you got this story that's thousands of years old, and yet we're still constantly enduring suffering. Is suffering something that we're supposed to end, or is it like suffering? I mean, he's spending his whole life in lifetimes from now on suffering because people are still suffering, isn't it?
This is where I'm not a Buddhist, right? I don't think life is suffering, and that's one of the precepts, right?
Yeah, right.
Black
Pill Buddhism all the time. Like suffering.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it sounds pretty Catholic. The Catholics are like, dude, it's like working out. It's suffering. Bro.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. I just don't. I don't really think that's the thing. I guess I'm more Egyptian, or at least certainly Thelemic in that sense, where I think existence is pure joy, and I think the only reason it would be miserable is because we've confused our bodies and the material world as being fixed, and that's reality, when that's not the case.
I
But
don't think
the more
suffering and misery is a mistake. I think it's a tool to teach you to get the fuck away from whatever's causing it. If you put
Yeah,
your
but
hand on a hot
suffering.
stove, if you weren't
Well, it's
if you
built
weren't able to
in.
feel pain, you
But
put your
people
hand on a
make-
hot stove, your hand is destroyed.
But people make hot stoves. Animals have been taught chaos by other animals. Nature has more violence that gets more nature. It's Spinozan. We have this idea of, you know, consequences beget more consequences. So we're living in a world where evil's made more evil, chaos has made more chaos. We have chaos in the system, but if we removed it from the system, couldn't the system keep thriving without it?
If you're suffering, you're learning something.
In international law, we have things called we have things called necessary evils, and that's the topic of morals, and you spend many nights debating these things.
So
But-
there's also this saying, there is no dharma without suffering. So like wherever there's suffering, there is the dharma. If there is no suffering, then there's no need. And that kind of pairs with the idea of a golden age where you're basically born enlightened, and you're not making huge spiritual progress. That's like, it's almost like summer of all ages. It's like you know, those were the times where historically, you have periods of, like, you know, Krishna is incarnated, or, you know, Shiva, or whoever it is, Dionysos is around. Those are higher ages, right? So in lesser ages like we're in now, there certainly is suffering, but the positive side of that is that with suffering is the possibility to build merit, right? Or the fact that time, right, is so condensed right now that that you are suffering like 4 lifetimes worth of things in your life, you know, even more so if you're a practitioner, because things speed up in that way, because you're asking for it. You're asking to resolve all these things between you and the enlightened state, or you and your beloved, if you have a god or deity that you're trying to get closer to, right? So, you know, so basically, if there's suffering, there is growth, right? You can
Yeah.
turn that into growth. If there's no suffering, then there's not so much growth. So like, you know, that should help to be a little encouraging if like if you do practice and you find that your life kind of turns to shit, and like you seem to have like really bad luck,
But you don't want to be like an alligator
that's
growing and growing,
a sign
right? Like
that it's
to freeze. Sorry.
I lost you.
No, I mean,
Sorry,
what he
I got a lag there, but I was saying, like, you know how alligators keep growing and growing and growing. So like you kind of growth can be cancerous. You know, there's like a point to growing when you're young, but once you've gotten to the point where you're an adult, maybe sustaining, like the idea of staying, you know, a
well,
mature.
under that definition, cancer would be growth, right?
Right. And so growth isn't always the best thing. Like you don't always want suffering. You might
You need to
suffer
constantly
through
burn
it.
away the parts that
Like,
aren't
what is
serving
it
you.
that
Isn't
it
that the
says
whole
in the
point of
Bible?
Lima?
What's that?
Some say that I would be the god of death, but I am the god of life. Like life is suffering is basically the Buddhist
Right.
understanding.
Yeah,
I
but
think
I
there's
like
an optimal
you were gonna,
ratio for depending on what planet and the environment you live in, like depending on how much oxygen, like there's a ratio of like, because you're limited to how much blood your heart can pump, and the taller you get and the more mass you acquire, you're not necessarily becoming bigger and stronger in the sense
What
of
is
like,
growth, really?
yeah, you're limited to what planet you're on, basically, or where you are in space and
Well,
time.
all muscle growth is suffering. Like all instigation to
Friction.
become better skilled at anything involves doing something that you're not actually receiving pleasure from doing firsthand. It's like you're doing something in practice that takes time and effort and sacrifice, right? That's like the whole understanding or metaphor between like ideas of Jesus and so forth and so on, is that the idea that you're sacrificing something to become better at something else. But all unseen things, whether they be in the future, the past, whatever, those all unseen things by definition are spiritual. So even a focus, like, this is the weird thing. We're in this weird time period where nobody wants to talk about spirituality. But if you rewind it 100 years ago, everybody and their mom was talking about spirituality. Like we've been talking about this all night with Belansky and all of those guys that were expecting like messiahs at the turn of the century. We're very few years away from that. Yet our understanding of what spirituality is very different. They were thinking of spirituality as a technology. You have ideas like Think and Grow Richer that basically talk about, it's been the most, like, it's one of the most best-selling books for almost a century. And basically what Think and Grow Richer basically discusses is like alchemism. Like, it's
that's like, so another reason why, and you know what, James, we're gonna get Noel, like he said, and we'll talk more about Hinduism for this purpose. Because every time we get to this point, it makes me want to talk about Hinduism more, because everyone's like, "Oh man, if only there was like an idea for this sort of like a practice that people could live that had some sort of consequences. I mean, on your body, maybe had like a physical routine for your religion. I don't know if anyone's doing that.
Yeah, yoga and a good diet.
Well, wait. Let's talk about Bhairava and the manifestation of Shiva as like a positive, and like the Agori. Like, what's the Agori? Yeah, what's the Agori?
So the Agori,
dreadless.
Bring up Bhairav.
You're gonna know a lot more about the Agori, but for me, basically the Agori are like testing the bounds of culture and almost like trying to get rid of the caste system. But sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Go on. You're very intelligent.
That's interesting. Hold on.
Oh, do I got like 10 seconds here to do that?
All right. Sorry, I had to.
I love those synths.
I know, right? AI synths are just so good. Well, it's interesting looking at the idea. First off, like, Hinduism is like really varied, and it's not like fair to call it a religion. It's more like a region of religion. A bunch of things going on.
Body of work.
Well, there's also just
Buddhism is essentially Hinduism stripped for export. Once you take all the concepts of Hinduism and remove all the stories and characters, you essentially get Buddhism.
Well, also you got the idea in Catholicism is that Catholicism conquered a bunch of regions, and when Catholicism conquered regions, they turned gods into saints, right? Well, similarly with Hinduism, you have different regions that practice different things that they've always practiced that have been, we call it all Hinduism because they kind of learned to get along, but they are completely different beliefs that are held by different groups and different people. And some of them are into, completely different cosmogonies, essentially. But what's interesting about
root of Hinduism is that every consciousness is an emanation of the one. And
I would say again, like
different masks of the same universe looking at
itself.
I would
say what's crazy is like Hinduism like has maybe even divorced roots. But if you want to talk about like Shivaism, Vaishnavism, Dharma, kind of the Dharma schools, this idea that there's sort of a trimurti, creation, existence, and destruction. Narayana is source, and out of source comes create, like beginnings and endings, completions, and everything.
But it's all one ashram.
Well, but
universe.
Yeah, to some people. I think the thing that's interesting also is like Shiva's often misunderstood to be this evil like destroyer, and it's really like somebody who comes in and finishes tasks. He's a
refresher.
He's a good old boy. He's very helpful, and
Shiva's the one who cleans up the dishes after you finish cooking,
but also can provide the milk, right? Like that's the Bhairava kind of idea.
Well, the idea is that Shiva's the one who removes the stuff that's not serving you. That's destruction, but that's a positive destruction. If it's not serving you, it should be removed, like a cancer.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's like literally like finishing a game, finishing a piece of art, finishing a product is like the same. The word doesn't necessarily just mean to break stuff. It just means to
you're
finish.
Crossing something off your to-do list.
Yeah, but sorry, you're gonna say, James.
So don't get it wrong. Bhairav is a wrathful form of Shiva, right?
Or
And
enthusiastic.
if you look, Bhairav is wearing the garland of skulls.
Just like Kali.
Yeah, exactly. And so like Kali is really kind of the patron goddess of the Agora. And you know, I don't know, where do you want to go with it? They're based, what their practice basically is putting themselves in situations that demand their spiritual practice. So it's not a practice where it's like, I feel like meditating today. It's a practice where you've literally put yourself in positions where if you don't do things right, you're not going to survive the night.
I love
So
that.
the Agori are starting from the absolute worst. And once they've kind of gotten their attainment through these things, they're an untouchable man, right? They're a free man. They can basically go wherever they want, and all that's left is divinity, right? So it's kind of like the inverse of like, you know, someone going like the other path, like right hand path, where they're doing everything good, and they're trying to reach God through, you know, going towards things that are good, right? And then later, the highest test of that is, can I still find God in this horrific act, right?
Are these the guys that fed George Stephanopoulos' human brain?
Maybe. I don't
There
know
was
who
just
that.
a CNN documentary about it, and it kind of was memed like
Is
maybe
that
last week.
Stephanopoulos?
Yeah, that was the Vice guy, right? Yeah, that was it's the same guys, where the guy took a bite out of the crisp skull, right? Like ripped the skin off the skull and ate it.
Mhm.
So like the practical thing about that is that you have
Oh, it was Reza Aslan. Sorry,
not
not
natural
George Stephanopoulos.
after that.
You have no natural.
You have no natural enemy. And so like the locals are
Yeah.
afraid of them because they have this
These-
concept that they're black magicians, and
They do
they
this in front of
certainly have
trains.
that ability, right? So,
They go in
but
front of trains and they do this, and they expect it to stop the train. And when the guy doesn't hit the brakes on time, it makes the news.
okay.
Uh,
You know, they
Well, it's
also
interesting they have dreadlocks, like, you know, the vow of the Nazarite, like that. It's interesting too.
I don't want this guy manning my
actually
brakes.
had Jews and Egyptians also had dreadlocks.
Everybody had dreadlocks except the Polish people. They have a single large dreadlock called a Polish plate. It's the only thing that can be considered a hairstyle and a disease.
And so, what's the deal with the skull again? Can you explain a little bit more about the skull? Like, a lot of these pictures, the guys are carrying a skull around. So, is that representing that necklace of skulls? I mean, or is that a different skull?
I
They
mean,
do a
it's the
little bit
same
of like
concept
rituals
as
and magic with it.
Yeah.
it's the same concept as what is it? Shivas or Kali's beheads. The Kali has multiple heads as almost like a bandolero around her. Like it's what is it called? There's a Latin word for it, multa morium or whatever.
Memento mori. Remember your death.
Memento mori. Right.
Yeah, that's
a lot of Tibetans drank out of skulls, and whole temples were
right.
devised out of skulls.
Right.
I prefer to keep a ceramic
Well,
one
I
in my
mean,
kitchen.
it just, you got to think about like Shakespeare and the Skull and Bones groups and all the people that would have been interested in this stuff, even Germans and also British people, and they're, you know, all these pictures of these dudes holding skulls, right? So I find that kind of interesting because it seems like they're doing the same thing or planning to do the same thing.
Remind you, how many
think
times
it's
have you taken
different.
up bones and flesh to do your work, and how much time do you have left with the ones you're working with now?
I'm not telling.
Memento mori.
So that would be the Western idea, but the Eastern idea still has some, like, of course it's that too, contemplation of death is kind of all you can
There's
do
also
if you live in a cremation ground. But the other part of it is that those things become spiritual tools, like Meta Egg said. The Kapala is the skull chalice that Tibetans use, and that's used for ritual, right? So that's the chalice is the top of a skull, right? And that is direct that's direct metaphor for what they're doing in the ritual, right? So if you think about what I said earlier about thaumaturgy, right? They're using um, basically like a base level magic like that to have more theurgic effects, right? So there's a practice called FOA or POA. Here, I'll type it.
They use colors, almost like the colors of the chakras. I've seen they do it. They put the skulls in an arrangement on the floor, and they have like different colored powders around them.
Yeah,
like a mandala.
I forget what that's. It's the 5 offerings or 6, or I don't know. I'm not exactly a Buddhist, but yeah. So FOA is the practice of basically opening the skull, right? So
Trepanation.
if that's a physical, what do you mean?
Like there are people who literally drill holes in their living skulls in a mirror with a DeWalt drill as a spiritual practice.
Right. That is actually part. That's one of them. That's kind of like not the best one. That's not the natural one. See, like, okay, that's Westerners doing it.
We
For
also
Tibetans, they have for
It started
Tibetans,
in Egypt.
they have a golden hammer. Yeah. So it's kind of showing you something that looks awful.
yeah. Well, the
Oh,
way
yeah,
that the Europeans.
Imagine being schizophrenic and they actually want to drill holes in your head to get the demons out.
But people still do this in Mexico, and actually, like, this was a thing that, if you look in Cusco and Peru and Chile, you'll find drilled skulls in, again, Egypt, and so there's some sort of a surgery that was being done en masse. This is like one of the earliest surgeries we know about is people doing like a piece of skull removal, which I find very interesting. Yeah.
They actually were able to cure bone cancer like that by just removing it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence of old surgery and stuff like that. But all those holes are in the wrong spot. So
Okay.
it definitely was not a spiritual.
So FOA makes doesn't make holes in your head. What's it do?
So it's part of the 6 yogas of Naropa, right? And the yogas of Naropa well basically, so like Naropa was a translator. I think it goes Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, and then oh my god, Milarepa. So that's
how could you forget that? I
know. How
good job.
Honestly, he's
shame on me.
I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddhist.
He's just Veda compatible. It's all right.
Oh, that's the whole movie.
So
yeah. Wow.
Are you gonna show Richard Gere now? What is this?
This is a movie of boreholes and stuff like that. Okay.
There's a documentary about people who do it and a historical treatise on people.
I'm gonna put a hole in your head in the Discord for anybody who wants to watch people drill holes in their head. Be careful. Don't do this at home, kids.
This is why I put Brazen Head in the chat, though, is because the idea.
Like, don't whoa, wait, back up. You can't put that out there without a warning. Like, that shit'll fuck you up if you're not ready to watch it. Be careful.
Brazen Head? Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
No, a hole in the head. That's not like a light watch. That's a real documentary.
All prophecy, like all prophets, get their heads chopped off, And why is that? Because the technology is said to be in the head. Like the head keeps talking after it's dead. That's the whole idea of chatbots and all of that shit, is that all prophets have help. Somebody gives them the information. That's why all prophets claim that it does not come from them.
All prophets are true, save that they know little.
Well, this is interesting looking at this idea of the FOA,
That's a
because
good
it sounds
quote. I
like
like that quote.
it looks like there's an antenna. There's like an antenna system using the chakras. Also, I see Asian, Indian. Like this seems like universal in a sense. This Tibetan art is kind of unifying. But what's the deal with the? So try to explain this. I'm sorry.
So FOA or POA. I mean, geez, try to pronounce.
Where do they drill it?
So basically, it would be the front of the head. I mean, if you read, who's that guy? Oh man, I forget his name. Anyway, he's a charlatan. So FOA, it's a practice to open the top of the skull, right? And I'm not telling you how to do it. There you go. That was a practitioner. Go back one more. Right there. So so that's pretty clear right there. So it's basically there's an attainment when that happens.
Where the crown is.
Exactly. And there's certain things that can happen after that's formed.
Does that line up with the third eye of the Tuatara, not lizard thing? Can you pull up a picture of the Tuatara's head, Andreas?
The what?
That's interesting.
TUA.
So it's all. I mean, that's definitely where the crown
Tuatara.
is. What if somebody has a double crown?
Eye.
I don't know what you mean.
Okay. You're saying that this unicorn guy,
that lizard has a third eye exactly where you're describing it.
Right. A lot of reptiles do. I think we do too, and we use it.
But that's what it's
covered by the
cortex. Oftenly, the third eye is called the reptile brain.
Right.
So
we have another layer of brain that
in a
slops over
haircut, the cowlick.
One at a time, Wells. One time.
So if you have a cowlick on your head, it's called a crown, right? The cowlick on your head is a crown. But that's basically where they're pointing to on that individual, is that where so the crown on your head is like the fingerprint on your thumb. It's where your skin kind of like tightens, and so everything grows from that pattern. But if individuals are saying that that's the third eye, what happens if you have two? Because individuals who have two crowns, when you get your hair cut, that would
you're saying
carry out the logic that it would be some sort of electromagnetic.
Obviously, that person would be a spider. Have like 8 third eyes.
Well, also you were and this kind of connects to the Book of the Law.
Yeah, I just said part of that. All words are sacred and all prophets true, save only that they understand a little. And then solve the first half of the equation, leave the second unattacked. That's speaking directly to Crowley.
That also speaks to
that's
Gödel.
important, because that means that prophets all have like a part of the equation, so that you can look back and see the whole equation.
So go back though. That's a good point. And go back, Andreas, to it. I want to point out the end of the line there, Book of the Law. Yeah. So, but thou hast all in the clear light, and some, though not all, in the dark. Right. If you understand the clear light, I think like there's
Lasers.
like clear light Buddhism, right? But the clear light state is essentially like the samadhi state. So I mean, this is like showing how the Book of the Law is really it's not exactly the way it seems, right? So like thou hast all in the clear light in the Gnostic state, though some but not all in the dark, meaning like when you basically go back to the cave, if you will, you don't have full understanding of these things, right? And this is like this is why the samadhi state is crucial for spiritual development and legitimate spiritual systems, right? So if you want, somebody had mentioned cults before, if you want to know the difference, it's whether or not they have practices, or the person bringing these things into the world has samadhi or not. If they can't produce samadhi, then they probably don't know what they're doing. Or there's also another option of being illuminated, where somebody would have, you know, they're not they're not they're not in samadhi, but they, you know, their mind is not just in, you know, in their belly all the time. It's kind of a little bit higher. It's like,
How does that line up with the concept of unwanted illumination, where, like, sorry, someone just eats mushrooms in high school or college and they end up realizing that they aren't the person they thought they
My
were? They're
life,
just the
please
universe
take it.
expressing
Take my
that.
life.
that's like,
They realize that the universe is just expressing that person at this particular point in history and time, history and space.
that's just using plant drugs to have a metanoia that you're not ready for. And it's usually really basic.
That's why my favorite prophets are all like the super lazy ones who like clearly didn't want to be prophets. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, come on, I wanted to sleep in that lifetime.
Terrence McKenna stopped taking mushrooms well before he started touring around and talking about all the things.
That's really relieving in a sense, because I really like worried that the mushrooms cause brain rot, which really persuaded me from not wanting to try all sorts of mushrooms.
Oh yeah, the mushrooms will eventually
But
eat you.
mushrooms are like proven to be pro-neurogenic, man.
Yeah,
They're
I know,
like
but
the
like Terrence
opposite
McKenna
of
died of
brain
brain cancer,
They're
so I had to.
literally
There you
the
go.
scientific
So I had to blame-
definition of brain
Cancer
rot.
and neurogenesis are probably the same
The
thing.
mushrooms ate his brain.
No,
They wanted
that's
that
kind
good.
of
They wanted that good juice.
It's more probable
They're
that
tripping
it was
on
the
Terrence
CIA.
McKenna right now.
that's kind of the problem. That's sort of the problem with the shamanic path, is eventually it doesn't work anymore. You know,
They
That's
all
like-
die. Every guru has died. Like,
Yeah, this is why I don't believe in dedicating yourself to helping others. Like, you can dedicate yourself to making yourself as strong as possible and then use that to help others. But to just straight up do it for some selfless reason, you'll just end up either burning yourself out or hurting people by accident.
So I'd
Yeah.
love to kind of add some credibility there, right? Because there's a great deal of doing sadhana that is actually selfish. Like, it does become a virtue that you don't go out to party, you don't show up for your friends, you don't do all these other things, because you're focused on your own personal development. That is selfish, you know, and that can lead to a very selfish nature, especially if you're a cave yogi. You're probably not a nice guy. Like, that's the truth, right? You're probably
Yeah.
not a nice guy, because you have to fucking scare the spiders out of your cave every night, and you don't know where your next meal is coming from. And you've renounced everything, so you don't care about your body, you don't care about pleasures and all this stuff. It's not somebody that you can relate to, right? So, like, this idea that I think you're working against here, Sean, is this idea that somebody who's enlightened or somebody who's religious or spiritual has to be a nice guy. And that's really not the motivation at the end of the day. Like Crowley was not, like, he was a kind, loving person, essentially, but he wasn't nice. He wasn't
Exactly.
nice.
But he didn't claim to be nice.
No, he didn't. And
He didn't claim to have some great work that was supposed to save 1 million people. He was writing because he was compelled to write.
Well, let's just leave it at, he was not trying to be this sort of nice guy that everybody loved, this, like, you know,
Yeah.
Western idea of, like, Christ being their best friend. You know, everybody wants to think Christ would be their best friend if he came back, or that, like, you know, if I really did meet an enlightened master, he'd really like me and see what a good person I am inside.
Well, I
And
never thought about that, but like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Can't you imagine like Jesus would like really be like, "It was good to see you. I gotta go see some people." Like, like for most of humanity, like it was good.
You'd be like, why are you masturbating? And you'd fucking like, honestly, if I think
Like, wait, do you really
Yes,
want me to
sicko.
explain that, Jesus, or are you telling me not
The
to do
Egyptians
it?
want to talk about masturbating.
so. We could talk about that that in a second.
I have
but
a bit.
it's-
I have a
it's funny.
comedy bit, because I think philosophically the problem is that not that Jesus didn't want us to masturbate, but that Jesus actually has to sit through us masturbating.
So it's
So
like,
that's the
dude,
whole problem.
hurry it up.
Jesus actually
Here's what I
has to be your lawyer and sit there and watch everything that you do.
Did you have to
So
go with all
Jesus'
the?
response is going
Why
to
the
be
red
so
rubber
responsible.
boots? Did you
I'd
need the
love
boots?
to chime in
Jesus
here.
Christ.
I know.
Jesus is like, honestly, dude, again? Do you think that you have time? Oh, you obviously have time. Jesus has to sit through all of that. So it's not that it's not that masturbation is a bad thing. It's not that thou shalt
Awkward.
not masturbate. It's that Jesus doesn't want to watch you masturbating all the time. That's what it is. That's what it is. Jesus is going to have to watch the whole recording of your life. And the fact is that most of us are looking at porn the majority of the time.
Probably more
Majority.
than people are pooping. More than
You
people are
kinda-
pooping.
You kind of have.
Yeah, you
Except
can forgive
Sean.
that because you have to do
Obviously,
that.
Sean is our golden child. Sean's never watched porn ever. He's only helped film it. That's not the same thing.
He was holding the boom mic though. Dude, it had the best sound of any. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Porn foley should be a job, but anyway.
It is.
Yeah. So it's like there really isn't anything wrong with it. You'll get prostate cancer if you have a dirty lifestyle and you don't do that. So like that's something, but like the whole, to relieve everybody here of their guilt or anything, the whole point is that you're retaining your life essence that can be used as fuel for other processes in the body. If you're not doing those practices, then it doesn't matter all that much, except for you are leaking your life essence. So
Mhm.
essentially your health, you're probably not doing it in a sacred way. And 3, the kind of the stuff you were talking about is the saintly life is a life that you would want somebody to see. If you have parts of your life that you wouldn't want anybody to see, you have no idea how you're going to feel in front of somebody that is actually attained, because there's this thing where that they know. So like I'll add something in the chat. There's the account of Pontius Pilate that I think the Catholic Church had, right? And it's where Pontius Pilate recounts to the emperor his experience with Jesus, right? And this is actually really great. That I don't know why I always am in the position of being a Christian apologist. I'm not particularly Christian, but I think I do a better job at it than some people. But here's one for the Christians, right? So we talked about the salvific chain, right? Jesus is from the salvific chain. That's a beautiful thing that exists in the world. In all this suffering, all this dark primordial slime that all of a sudden had this bead of light that exploded into the physical world, right? There's all this stuff that really gives us so much sorrow. There's no chance of knowing what to do if no one tells you, right? You wouldn't even know that enlightenment exists. So we have this salvific chain, and it's a blessing that we had Christ come down, right? Now, what I'm getting at is basically where Pontius Pilate tells Jesus to come basically meet with him because he wanted to tell him that he needs to tone down basically his dunking on the Pharisees all the time, because they kind of were like, we're going to kill this dude, right? So he was stepping into political territory, and Pontius Pilate ordered Jesus to come hither, right? And so Pontius Pilate is waiting there, and Jesus appears. And Jesus sort of waves his hand like, you called me. And Pontius Pilate explains that Jesus's presence evoked this insurmountable feeling of guilt that made him unable to speak with authority that he usually has to Jesus, because he recognized that there's just this presence to him that invoked guilt deep inside of Pontius Pilate. You know, Pontius Pilate was in the position of authority, and it was the authority of Jesus's natural attainment that struck guilt in the heart of somebody that is meant to civically procure justice. Right? This is how justice is not a human affair. Right? So the attainment of Jesus, right? The state of Jesus was that he was so far advanced. If you look at the Gnostic stories of his childhood, he shows some really advanced signs at a really young age that you wouldn't see in a child. You'd see it in a really old sage, like 200, 300-year-old sage. So my internet's probably going to cut out.
No, but that's
So
a good point.
Give me a
because
second.
That's actually said.
It's the
There's
karma
a
of
point where
speaking on this. But let me just finish that. That samadhi, for example, has a presence to it. If someone goes into samadhi next to you, you can have your eyes closed and you can feel it. That's the certain test of a master. That's the certain test of an adept, somebody who's actually practicing, actually has something going on. It's literally like being in the room with a radiant sun. That's a great picture for right this second. Either a radiant sun or like a piece of uranium, you know? It's literally radiation that's coming off.
I
And
think that
why?
that door can swing both ways, though. Individuals like that can cause a lot of chaos. And that's what we're talking about here, is like the interplay between order and chaos. The rule, the second rule of thermodynamics, is that everything is moving from order into chaos or entropy, whatever. It's the same thing. So you have to understand that, like, all of our archetypal, like, melodramas are basically based off of that interplay. That there's Sean over here, our moral hero in shining armor, right? Sean
Okay.
Morris over here. He's like
He's handsome.
he if you have the power, he'll use it correctly. And then there's other individuals who use magic for amoral aspects. And this is actually within
Immoral?
scripture. This is
Immoral?
within scripture, because all unclean spirits, those individuals who hear voices inside their heads that are not their own, recognize Jesus on cue. That's the whole, that's the, like, there's this whole thing of the Pharisees saying, well, obviously Jesus is part of the demons because the demons know who he is. But that's not not what the messaging is. What the messaging is the same technology. Those individuals.
It's not salvific. Christ is not salvific. We've turned Christ into a salvific character. Christ was telling you how to be like Christ. You know,
right?
So
Christ is a group. Christ is
Yeah.
like a
Be
branch.
part of exactly. Be part of this Christ movement that he's creating. Right. Like co-heirs of Christ. It says in the Bible. You know, you will be co-heirs of Christ. You're not like knights or serfs.
This is why I like the Hermetica so much, because while that's probably the case, you know, Christ was here to teach us to be Christ-like. He didn't, right? That's the fact, is that he never wrote his book, right? It would have been a Torah, right? But he never wrote his
He was
book.
murdered. He was murdered and not allowed. He was murdered and not allowed, and people make it into this celebration that he was murdered and not allowed to write the Torah and become.
Did he ever learn to write?
Yeah. So
Probably
I disagree that he wasn't of the salvific chain. I think he was, and the rejection of him kind of warrants this sort of like deeper karmic events that have to happen. Otherwise, we'd probably be living in a very different age. I don't think you're going to stop a dark age from coming, because I kind of have a theory that it's the position in the universe, our galaxy, or our solar system, basically going like this through space. I think the position of it probably changes time, and that's just kind of my educated theory on the age. But but
That's proven today.
I think like when Jesus is saying like I'll be coming back with a sword, is like kind of him having a, you know, calling it that he's not going to be able to write his thing. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the idea. This was a loving savior archetype, and it's not really that he was a nice guy, you know. He wouldn't let what's his name bury his parents. He's like, you either choose to bury your parents or you come with me, you know. It's like that's really harsh. That's really harsh. So it's not like he was necessarily being a nice guy to his apostles, or anybody that wanted to learn from him. But the act of incarnating to bring a system to the world, was basically an act of compassion. And the fact that he couldn't do that is like quite
all
a
more relevant.
Supposed.
I mean, it's yeah, and also, you know, the other thing is that he created a new method of attainment through martyrdom. Like, I'm not going to say he's the first martyr, right? Because I don't think he was. I think Dionysos, or, you know, Gilgamesh, or you know, that it's the dying god complex is in there. But to do that for the sake of you know, not just an act of liberation from the body, to show that the body doesn't matter, which is that dying god complex, that Dionysian archetype, that salvific archetype always seems to do that. Same with Orpheus, right? I
Right.
mean, Hercules
Technology,
starved
brazen
himself.
head.
But Orpheus doesn't
Cut the
die.
head off. Cut the head off.
Orpheus's head is still being oiled by, you know, families in Crete. But you've got this idea with Jesus that he's murdered, and so then they invert the whole message in the next century to be about martyrdom.
That's an implication of technology, something being put in the head.
So what do you
Were
mean?
they telling the story
by-
faithfully, or were they trying to use it for their own ends?
Yeah, Jesus tells people to forgive debt. It's a jubilee period. He's saying, look, there's all these people that are enslaved. There's all these people that have too much debt. If we just renounce all these debts and we start thinking about it on a deeper level, like forgiving each other debts. I'm not going to lend anything I don't want. I want back. I just want everyone to also think of this as a karmic level. There's a karmic level beyond debt that this is alleviating, and then we can unrock the boat. And that's this idea of everyone can just sort of forgive the debt together. We can alleviate karma in a single generation, perhaps.
Well,
Well,
it's
see,
all about
the other
karma,
thing-
right?
Karma
The
is not a
self-pay-
cosmic scoreboard. It's just your doing. It's like
No,
if
well,
you
the
karma
left a
is
message
sacrifice is
consequence.
home when
all
you
a
get back from
scoreboard.
work.
One at a
Sacrifice
time,
is the
boys.
definition of karmic scoreboard, right?
You can do
The-
rituals to postpone karma.
can
That's
actually.
what it's
You
meant to
can.
do, though.
Buddha extended his life, and so like at the end of Gautama Buddha's life, he was like, all right guys, peace out, it was fun. And they're all like, no, we really need you to stick around because we don't understand shit, please keep teaching us. And he's like, I really, even the Buddha should not be doing these things, can't stop time and karma. And they're like, but please, you're the Buddha. And he goes, okay, I will, but there will be huge consequence from it. And basically he did the ritual, extended his lifetime, and as a result a huge earthquake happens. So that shows you that karma does actually have a substance to it. It's the math of physics,
It's
right?
I literally
physics.
worry
Think
if
about-
something I did caused COVID.
It's
well,
the-
everything
Why
we
I
do.
try not
I mean,
to fuck
karma
around
is
anymore.
judgment, right?
Garshin
It-
Rinpoche,
and-
Garshin Rinpoche said that the people who that will be affected by COVID, he said this as soon as it started, when the lockdown started. He had an empowerment and all this stuff, and he said that we should all pray for people who are going to die from this disease, and the people who are going to be affected the most are people who smoke and lung diseases and all this stuff. Not exactly the most accurate in my opinion, but the idea is that karma is a physical thing that has to happen, and it's blind and dumb, and it doesn't matter if it happens to you or your body or the tree over there, right? Which
What
is
you're explaining is a technology, though. That's like, okay,
Technology just means a body of work around surrounding
No,
techniques.
like think about the desert right now. China will go out to the desert and they'll start putting water and plants in the desert. And if you think about that, like now all of a sudden
Provable.
it'll grow in water and there'll be
Provable.
rain in the desert. But this is alchemy. This is magic. This is technology.
Right,
If you told
right.
someone,
that
look, we're going to go
soil
to the desert,
has no
and we're gonna-"
nitrogen. You're not growing shit in it.
Well, they do everything they want, and then birds will like start to land there. I mean, they very quickly they've
All
done
crops
this.
are
They've tried-
rituals. All
Yeah.
crops are rituals. You figure out what works and you work with it.
Something that
I
CJ had
like
said
to
in the
have-
chat, though,
so-
kind of jumps out
Fair
at me.
enough.
Psychedelic
That might be
drugs
over
do
for
have a
people's heads.
potential for abuse and are not for everyone. He's right about that. The guy in the chat, CJ, sometimes people do need to stay away from those things for their own benefit.
So
We need
yeah,
to make
there's-
sure that we put that disclaimer out there. They're
I
not
think
for
that-
everybody. They're not always appropriate. Not every time, even if sometimes they're appropriate, not all times. People should be careful with them. They're very dangerous things akin to fire.
You
I
can get
fucking
by in
love
your life
Sean,
without
dude.
even doing any of them, really, to be honest.
Absolutely, it's not necessary. It's only something that's for people who are ready for it and who can take it.
You're saying ritual or magic, or what are you saying?
Psychedelic drugs.
Yeah. What are,
Oh.
oh,
But it's the
okay.
same to a degree.
Don't set
That
yourself
too,
on
yeah.
fire by accident. Yeah.
Well, look, as a general statement,
Good advice.
spirituality is not self-help. It's
Yeah.
not therapy. It's not
It's
self-help.
bitter.
If you
Look
want
at Jim Carrey. He was enlightened and he's still a piece of shit.
no, that's not enlightened. That's
You know what I
that's
mean,
a-
though.
That's a rich guy who's becoming an avadhut or what is it?
A douchebag.
A religiously inspired person that can be egalitarian about it. That's fine.
The movie he
Great as
did,
Robotnik, though.
a lot
the
of
movie he did on 23 was interesting. That was
the
had some
movie he did
occult
about-
vibes to it.
that's
The making
okay.
of the Man in the Moon made me despise him, though. What he did with the family of Kaufman? No, sorry, you don't do that. That's not method acting. That's just being a douche.
What about the?
No, I think that's what Andy would have done to his own family. However, I agree with you and
Jerry
disagree
Lawler?
with you at the same time.
He
What
would
about
not
the,
have handled Jerry Lawler like that. Absolutely not. I'm sorry. You don't dress up as someone's dead best friend and throw broken bottles at them. That's fucked up.
Who is the
Oh,
guy?
I get it, man. I get it. But that's like the whole idea of secret societies is that there's a moral code that is opposite
No,
of what
moral
you
code, right or wrong.
understand
No, if I
naturally.
see somebody doing that, I'll punch him in the fucking head.
I kind of want to hear.
I believe you, Sean, 120%. If I'm out with you on a night and we're drinking and that shit happens, I'm watching you punch someone. I completely
I don't know.
understand your point of view.
Whenever I hear about Jim Carrey, I think about Charles Rocket. Do you guys remember Charles Rocket?
Show us.
What was that?
Charles Rocket was an actor from, all kinds of great movies. He was in this and that. You remember his
Was he
face?
the original Rubber Face?
Dude, he was in so many movies, and he was in like I think he was on Saturday Night Live for like a season. He got the role. He got the job that Jim Carrey wanted on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
and
He's got
he looks
that
like a cross
chin.
between Jim Carrey and Leslie Nielsen almost.
dude, this guy was so good,
that's a
so
good one.
funny. Everybody loved him. Anyway, he was stabbed to death in his Connecticut home in 2005, and they tried to play it off that it's just a suicide, but there's a bunch of weird stuff about that. And anyway, there's also the other one with Jim Carrey's girlfriend death, right? The Jim Carrey's Caroline White suicide. There's all these weird deaths around Jim Carrey. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. But
I mean,
Interesting.
Jim
not for
Carrey
nothing,
is the most syncy actor ever. As far as synchromysticism goes, Jim Carrey's your dude.
yeah, I mean,
All
he
right,
I
does.
I'll
don't
give
know
you
if that
that.
means he's like Illuminati or if he's like inspirational as far as like what he's chosen has been like godly ordained. He's fucked up. There's no
Yeah,
Yeah,
doubt.
some-
like just
some
because
weird
you're
one.
spiritually privileged does not mean you're a cool guy.
Well, I mean, it's all these people in Hollywood that you get to see like one part of them, and that's kind of an interesting point to James's. Someone who can see your whole life and see what you do in the shower or in the dark, is different than we see our perspective of celebrity, which is just like here's them acting. Here's someone paid to write, and here's someone who lights the scene, and here's someone who does their makeup, and now you get to see them just for like a few minutes in the way that they look the best they possibly can. And that you build that up and think that's the way people should behave. And,
Yeah. It's actually scary.
yeah.
Or how if your life was like represented to someone else, you think it would take that much effort to relay it. And I don't think that that's true. I mean, you guys know who Michael Perslinger is?
No, well, who is he?
Michael Perslinger is a Canadian scientist who basically says that the memory that we use.
Oh yeah.
He takes a certain. He says that a certain wattage is used, and that wattage, if you equate it to what is available in Earth's electromagnetic sphere, that it would take about approximately 10 minutes to download every individual's personal memorial experience that has ever existed. Does that make sense? Like, so he there's a video out there called No More Secrets. He died in 2019. There's certain things that he's done scientifically that have been proven. And he has this idea that what it takes to make you as a human is within it's Avatar. It's basically Avatar. He's basically saying that anything that you have experienced has been downloaded into the core of the planet since
The
birth.
Akashic record.
Basically. But here's the thing. Okay. He created this thing that is scientifically proven called the God helmet, which basically says that if you put an electromagnetic field into a human's brain, that they experience God. He is an atheist, stark, raving, mad atheist. He did not want that helmet called the God helmet. The only reason that helmet is called the God helmet is because that like 80% of the individuals who put it on say that they are communicating with God. Do you get what I'm saying?
I have a story
Right,
about.
but is that just the feeling of individuality being removed and realizing that you are the universe expressing a
That
person
is
at their
literally
particular
Michael
point in
Persinger's
time?
whole point. Michael Persinger said, whether or not God exists does not matter because I found the receptors from which he's seen and heard.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. That's perfect way
mushrooms
of
can do that.
expressing it.
Actually, I think
So
that's from
I'm
like
not saying you should do it, but
MK Ultra doctrine in the
you
He
can.
60s.
came at it from Sean Morris's point of view. Sean Morris's dialectic that he is presenting right now is what Persinger came to this with. However, when you put it on individuals' heads, they basically say that they're communicating with God. So it didn't matter what he thought. It didn't matter what you thought. It mattered what the mass percentage of individuals who put it on their head thought.
Clinical
And
trials.
that is all that they were communicating with God. Therefore, it's called the God helmet through slang. You get what I mean? He didn't want
what
it called
effects does it
that. It's
have?
called that because that's what people named it.
James, you're saying they put the God helmet on a Tibetan monk? Oh, right. I think I saw a thing about that. Hold on.
Yeah. And he really did not like it. He said, please never do that again.
Wow.
Because Buddhists think the opposite. So this thing produces voices in your head. Buddhists say ignore the voices in your head.
I mean, they have God helmets. The
not
Buddhists have their
really-
own God helmets, right? I mean,
So it's not
They're
really
trying to-
the voice. It's not really like the voices in your head. I mean, I guess you could say that because the samadhi experience when they do brain scans of a monk going into samadhi, they always love to do scientific experiments on their local friendly Buddhist monk, right? And when they go into samadhi and they're wearing basically like a scanner of their brain waves, it basically shows up as though they're in a coma, except they're smiling and they're waving and to let them know that they're in it, and then having a conversation with no brain waves, right? This is direct proof that consciousness does not come from brains. That's a silly idea that people keep making these silly helmets out of when it's not the experience. You can make the brain go blank through forceful means like this, but it's not the experience. It's like
I'm reading about this right now. It seems to me like this seems to do some sort of dissociative state similar to diphenhydramine overdoses, where people do see lots and lots of entities that they begin to commune with. And there's actually a problem online now where there's internet communities surrounding Benadryl where they're forming a religion about it. The Hat Man is like their main patriarch for some reason.
Yeah,
so they're all the same apparatus.
I've seen that.
They're
Like
taking
the sleep paralysis demon, almost in a sense.
Yeah, like they're just
drugs,
purposely dissociating the different parts of their brain, and then whatever the story is that it tells when it
Or
all
the
comes back in
DMPL.
sync is their trip.
So Andreas, look up the Monroe Institute.
Oh, I love them. They're great.
I don't
Yeah,
recommend
I've
any of that
interviewed
shit,
them.
by the way. If you ever, I don't even recommend taking Benadryl as directed because that shit
no, I
makes
mean,
you
please
stupid the next
send your
day.
children unattended to the Monroe Institute by all means. No, I'm just kidding. I mean,
They're
Their
like,
YouTube channel. You
associated
should
with.
you
So,
should
like,
play their some of the audio on their YouTube channel. They have some free audio there.
You're talking about the binaural beats or whatever.
Binaural
Oh,
beats.
you're speaking of a different
Binaural beats.
institute.
Binaural beats.
Yeah, you can
But
buy.
that's the whole idea that there's different parts. It's the inside out idea. The Pixar inside out is that there's multiple individuals talking to you inside your head.
Yeah,
Your
brain is
we
stereo.
know that.
It's got a
We
corpus
know that.
callosum.
We know that.
Right. So, like, are you familiar with Gurdjieff or Fourth
Yes,
Way
of course,
or
of course, of course.
Ouspensky? So, okay, so like Ouspensky has kind of the best way of talking about this. Actually, the best book. It's the most succinct, but still kind of a slog. Like it really tests your attention span to get through any of these books. But the Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution is probably the best introduction to all of this stuff.
Possible evolution, like going forward or coming here.
The psychology, put psychology of man's possible evolution.
Fuck, man.
You
There's
might
so much
actually like
shit that we haven't read, dude.
you might actually like the Tertium Organum, which is the book on physics and like creation and Ouspensky's philosophy on matter and all this stuff, which he wrote as a treatise on scientific whatever, and Gurdjieff read it and said, "Sir, if you knew half of what you wrote about, I'd become your student." And of course, the story goes that Gurdjieff becomes his teacher. But in this book, it talks about how the person who sets the alarm at night is a completely different person than the one who has to wake up for it. Right.
Right.
And
It's not a
so
continuous consciousness.
right. And there's this fragmentation of being, and the whole goal of Fourth Way and Gurdjieff's work is attaining objective being, which is what they've called it, right? Now that so like what they were doing, in my opinion, from my experience with them and other systems, is that they are training the ego to be subservient to this objective consciousness, right? Which is supposed to result in gnosis, right? So Gurdjieff, basically, he didn't know how to teach what he had going on. He was kind of naturally gifted. He had clairvoyance and some sort of
Is that the CERN logo?
No, this is the Enneagram.
Enneagram.
Looks similar to the CERN logo.
CERN logo is like 3 6s, 666. You know,
Whoa.
Yeah. The Enneagram is a 9. Isn't that right? Enneagram is a 9-pointed personality archetypical model of the human psyche, amongst other things, that represents the divine sacred principles. Like, we're made up of each other, right? You don't exist without each other. So
it kind of it also kind of shows the octaves as well, like
right,
when
it's a choir of octaves, exactly.
But it's one above. It's 9. I mean,
Because
the 666
1
is
through
like
8
pretty
creates the
explicit.
octave. What do you mean the 666?
Well, he said the CERN, which is the 666.
Yeah.
is a
The CERN
like,
logo is brutal. The CERN logo is just
pretty
way different. Way different.
That's a good call.
It's a cool logo though. 666. I like it. It's like
that's a cool. I mean, that's a cool correlation. I don't necessarily like wholeheartedly say that CERN is the same as that symbol, but I think that's a good observation.
Dude, Taco Bell eye? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, dude.
It's a lizard eye.
How do people live? I just don't understand.
But that's what
I just never eat Taco Bell.
We live in a world where
I just see it whenever I
Taco
walk
Bell has
around.
Capitalized.
It's creepy.
They've
Jurassic Park.
turned like Bellinami. What is it called? The Bellinami or the Illuminati as the Taco Bell guys. They're owning it. They're like I live in Denver. Denver has, how the conspiracy theory about Denver International Airport. Yeah. Well, if you walk around it, they're remodeling right now. So they have these signs. You can look them up on the internet that are basically like, oh, we are building new habitations for the reptile people. Please excuse us. They're making a joke about the conspiracy theory. It's wild. It's wild.
There's a theory that Satanists or Luciferians have to like say what they're doing before they do it. Like they have to make it known to the public what they're doing. That's a theory.
Right there. That's it. You just had the billboards right there. It says, like, you see this.
Imagine there being a tunnel all the way from the Pentagon all the way to Denver.
Yeah.
I imagine.
They're putting
that'd
it in
be,
your face, like it's
wouldn't that
becoming a
be
marketing. Conspiracy theory has
unbelievable?
become a marketing issue.
What's happening behind as well? Gargoyle breeding grounds.
What?
Literally. Gargoyle
That's
breeding
like
grounds.
if
Cool.
you know the
The
gargoyle.
clone program.
Oh man, it's fucked up. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. It's
Andreas,
fucked
we
up.
should go visit Alex and like take a video in the airport when we go there.
Dude, I'm into it. Does he live in
That'd be
Colorado?
cool.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
right by Denver.
That'd be cool. Well,
Me
you
too.
know, we
Come
are
visit.
I usually try to do a 2-hour show. We almost are at 3. Do you guys want to cover anything else?
I'll say something about that area. That area in Denver is like modeled to be like the most safe, the safe part in the entire world from like cataclysmic events. But the most safe part on that topic from human events would probably be right around like southern Russia or like in the middle of the Caucasus.
If they could drain Lake Baikal and you could put like a little base at the bottom of it, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to include patient HM. I sent a little thing in the chat. His name is, I can't even, Mollison, Henry Mollison. Before the year of 2016, what is it, 2008? I thought it was 2016. He was known as
Bilateral.
patient HM. He had his entire he's the guy, he's the 51st, you know, the Adam Sandler movie called 51st Dates.
Okay. Yep.
He's the basically patient. He's the patient whose brain was taken out or his memory cognitive issue was taken out. But they continued to do experiments on him for years after his partial lobotomy, where he would actually learn tasks. So they could teach him how to do certain things, although he would not remember doing those things.
And he could play piano, but it couldn't tell you why. I've heard of this guy.
He couldn't tell you that he remembered playing piano. They would tell him jokes. The same jokes every day. He would be like, I don't remember ever hearing that joke, but he would laugh less every day. They would teach him tricks like how to go through a maze and a mirror. So they'd show him the reverse of the maze. He would have to figure that out. He would get quicker every day, but he would not remember doing it.
The connection to the other.
It's like when you're playing a Twitch speed game, like a game that really requires just constant input, output. You don't sit there thinking about how you remembered, how you learned to play it. You just play it.
Right. But you don't remember playing. Like in that process, almost memory acts as part of a bandwidth like consumer. So if you remember doing it, it's almost harder for you to do it. You have to not think.
So every time the Messiah comes back, it's just faster and faster.
Doesn't that mean isn't there something in the corner about that where time speeds up?
Probably.
Trying to tie things together.
The samadhi happens faster and faster. That's the thing you were saying?
Oh, they achieve it?
Yeah. Because it's not really native to the body. That's like your first experience of what you are. Like not you're not a body. It's like it's like, what are you enlightened to? You know, it's that you're this thing that you thought you were this whole time. You're not that for very long anyway. So
you're not your memories.
Yeah, I believe that memory is a function of awareness, not vice versa. Like the memories are what you are aware of. You're not remembering your awareness.
And you're always changing. That's for sure.
Well, awareness never changes. It's like consciousness changes, but awareness never changes. Like that's, if you can latch on to awareness, you can do a lot of things meditation wise, you know. And that's kind of the start of things. And yeah, the other stuff really doesn't matter, honestly. It's like all these people who might be proud that they do this or that, or they, you know, they jerk off onto sigils because they're into chaos magic or something, you know, or
they don't because they're pious.
They don't because they're pious and they think Jesus is the only magician around, or the only one that's allowed to be a magician, you know.
Don't put that visual in my head. I didn't see Jesus doing that.
I'll give you an example.
Doing what? Oh no, not the. I'm not.
Don't worry.
What am I saying? Jesus would do that.
I know.
One interesting thing, though.
You're not running for president. Don't worry.
I've been. Yeah. Okay. That's good. But one thing I have been thinking about is like whether or not the Eucharist like is supposed to be the blood of Mary and the flesh of Christ, right? Which are the rarefied fluids of their essence, right, as a Eucharistic rite for the apostles, as a transmission of their attainment, their holiness.
I think that like you could say that the Eucharist became a lot of things for a lot of people after Christ died, you know, because you got the archonic Eucharist where they're literally eating people, you know. So there's a point where the sophists are talking about the Pistis Sophia, and of course there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. But before with Christ, I kind of think it's just closer to the Jainist and Vaishnavist alternative to sacrifice that's presented with rice cakes, which I think plays really into my whole thing with Christ not being a sacrificial scapegoat. If Jesus like last thing, this is important, right? Like Jesus' last thing that he does isn't dying. Like this is forced to die. His last choice thing is to have this Last Supper. And the Last Supper is this important meal where he's sharing food with his friends, which is like the rice cakes. Like the Jains and the Vaishnavas said, we don't have to do animal sacrifices anymore. We can have, actual like bread that we can share. And so this kind of idea of Jubilee, saying, hey, look, we could all just do it like this. This is a model of how to behave, right? And so I feel like memetically, like a Charles Dawkins level, Christ is the ultimate meme, because he's showing people, and this actually does take off in a way. Even if people are arguing about it, that's actually a good thing, because people are still trying to figure out how to live that model. And it still comes up over and over again in every generation that we need this Jubilee, right? Like if we don't do it, we end up getting stuck in this. Yeah.
So, so like here's like there. So to understand that, it's always good to cross-ref. Like this is the really good thing about perennial philosophy, or being syncretic, is taking that example that we don't really have a reference for in the West and comparing it to things in the East, right? In the East, you have things that are prasad, right? So it's like the transubstantiation of offerings occurs when you offer them to a deity, and then those get consumed, and that's that communicates the inherent energy in those foods, right? So it's almost like you offered these things, you invoked God into your altar or the foods themselves, and they've taken on this radiation, and then you consume that, and that's like doing practice, right? So so sacrifice, historically, the purpose for that was to release some energy that you can do something with. That is old. That is an old technology, if you will, right? In the book of the law, it says the rituals of old are black, and you know that they're all abrogate, meaning like we don't do that anymore. We don't do that stuff anymore. Means that you don't have to take a life in order to advance spiritually, right? And that was explained.
That's the basis of most spirituality, though. Like all Christianity is based off of the idea of you no longer have to give a whole bunch of offerings to a whole different bunch of gods, including your kid.
Well, because of the age, because it was so dark back then, right? It was such a different age that things were so dense that you didn't have as much of a possibility of seeing these things, right? Or
So
let alone
as far as
seeing.
being pious, that makes sense. If you're on a timeline, it would be more important to be pious towards the beginning of the timeline, because that would create a bigger branch of your legacy. You get what I'm saying? Like if you adhere to, like, say, Leviticus, then you would be doing things that were the more beneficial to your health, which would create more children, which would create more people in a higher timeline. Do you get what
So
I'm saying?
yeah, but I think you've gone civic again, right? If we confine this conversation to just the light of the gnosis, because that's what's at stake here. Like Jesus didn't write a book on how to get along with your wife, how to make somebody love you in 60 seconds or less. It's none of that. What's at stake is the divinity, right? The grace descending on you and how to act in order for that to happen, right? But the thing that's at stake here with the Eucharist is the communication of that substance, right? You could call it it's like the Shekinah, right? Descends upon um, a master when he goes into uh, you know holy mindset or something like that. That's literally the blanket of energy that comes down on holy men, right? So that is what most people don't experience. They don't see that. They don't understand that that's the currency of an enlightened person or a prophet, and that basically that can be communicated, right? That's like your Shaktipat, your Eucharist. Um, you know, that's like consuming relics, even. That's in the Nyingma. That's in uh, a whole bunch of different stuff. I mean, that was a huge thing in the Egyptian system as well. They had this thing called mufkuts, which they show as like bringing this like little triangle to the pharaoh, and the pharaoh would consume that, and that was basically the Eucharist, right? Um, so the idea is that you transubstantiate a piece of food or a drink with either holy substance, which can be amrit from somebody who has the nectar flowing, and I'm not going to explain that. Or it can be that somebody transmuted the food either through invocation of God or through their own divinity, right?
Is
So
that
that
based on the fact that they may have been able to absorb the food energy themselves, and rather than doing that, they like burnt sacrificed it?
so two different things, like the burnt sacrifice thing, um, or killing an animal. That's literally for the life force that flows out, that you do things with that.
Right.
That's not kosher these days. It's just not necessary. It's actually kind
Literally not
of negative.
kosher. That was like
Yeah, it's
Hitler's whole
negative.
motivation between, like, the genocide of the Jews was to unleash the life force. In fact, it wasn't just
Hitler was a
Jews.
vegetarian.
What's
What's that?
that?
Hitler was a vegetarian.
That's wild.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
sure, probably before, because of his
Mental
own,
illness.
like, karma or whatever. But
Okay,
in
interesting.
all
Yeah,
actuality, he was trying to release karma. He was trying to release individuals who were, like, locked in unproductive
As
bodies.
as far as I understand, the reason they got onto that whole flow was that they identified the Jews truly as God's chosen people and wanted to usurp that position.
I don't
we should.
think that that's necessarily true. Like, there's this idea, okay, so if the Messiah comes from the Jewish individuals, if you kill all the Jews, the last one standing is the Messiah. It's this weird idea,
Right, but
that
then the Messiah has no
The
Jews to
farther
lead, so then what, does he lead your people instead?
the
Like, I
farther
think
you
that's
go
what they were
down the
driving
rabbit
at.
hole, the T becomes silent.
oh, I get what you're saying. So it's the same idea as like across the
Go down there.
abyss and the Kabbalah Jewish
Can you check those
understanding.
doors, please?
Everybody above the abyss and the Jewish Kabbalah tree of life, everybody up here says that this is right, but when you get past the abyss, it says this is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a misinterpretation or a reflection. It's the red pill, blue pill shit. Like when Morpheus says, well, you could take the red pill or the blue pill, you see it in his sunglasses. So it's really like the left is the right and the right is the left. There's a confusion. And that confusion goes all the way down into like the Antichrist. Most of the predictions of the Savior are mixed with this idea of the Antichrist, who is indistinguishable from the Savior. That's because they're all rooted in the same fucking source. Do you get what I'm saying?
You are also going off of a not so good seer, Nostradamus, right? Isn't that
Dude,
where that revelation comes from? That
to a
there
certain extent, Notre Dame said that sooner or later the Savior will realize who the bloodline he has become, blah, 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 blah. But what you're dealing with is prophecy. What you're dealing with is the fact that there's been a whole bunch of individuals who throughout history have said themselves as prophets, who said that they got communications from somewhere else that produced information that they did not know. And then they interpreted that. And that information used to come from the future or whatever. Blah, blah,
So
blah,
that
blah, blah.
information came
all
from
prophets
the
are
things that
true.
moved above our heads, the planets in
They've-
the sky. They originally, people didn't know how to farm or predict the seasons, and when they got the information from the stars and when it would warm up and when it would cool down, they were able to actually begin to start irrigating and farming correctly and actually build an agricultural society rather than act randomly. And they built a
Right.
priest class around that knowledge. And that knowledge was
What
secret
is
for a
that?
very
Their
long time.
knowledge. They're literally telling
No,
you
they
that
received
is
it
not
from the
their knowledge.
stars.
Right. But to us, if a motherfucker comes up to you on the street and says, "Hey, yo, I figured out how to drive, like I can grow this great miracle crop, man, because
Yeah.
this methamphetamine told me behind this 7-Eleven I can grow this crop." And you'll be like, "Fuck you, homie. That don't mean shit." But
Straight.
you rewind that 1,600 years and they'll be like, well, let's try to see if he can grow that crop. And he grows that crop and it's fucking corn. You get what I'm saying? Like there's been things that have happened that have been said to have been completely against probability that humans have discovered. And every single time that has been like the God's technology. Every time. There's all of these influences that if you go back through the mythology of humans, they teach us agriculture, they teach us language, they teach us astronomy, all of these things that we think are hidden technologies. This is the fucked up thing. More often time than not, we think that individuals who come before us are stupid as shit. Yet everything that we have is based off of what they had. And they are telling us it didn't come from them. What does that mean? Is that religious experience? No, this is it. Individuals have studied religious experience. They've studied it. Why? Because it changes the whole course of human civilization. In the course of like Jesus, and the course of Anunnaki, and the course of like Joan of Arc. All these people say that they have like communications from Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick is somebody who's only a couple of years away from us. And he's telling you that people told him what to say and he didn't know it. And those things are what our pop culture is now. What the fuck does that mean? This guy's telling you that people didn't create, or he didn't create what we think he created, that those ideas came from someone else that basically we perceive as prophecy. Philip K. Dick has kinds of
Celebrate.
It's been real, guys.
We're gonna show them love. The Exodus way.
This is like Juice Newton.
All right. Well, thank you, Mythoclast. Anybody who just became a member, I just wanted you to know, that was all Mythoclast. So yeah, make sure you jumped on that, and you've got, because there's some deleted content that you might be getting.
I'm sorry. When I get to the 3-hour mark, I get a little eccentric.
No, I love you. That's why we keep you.
I was liking it. I thought it was fun.
You can continue if you wanted to. I just had it's dharma and dogma. They it's part of my life. I don't know.
I love dogs.
Have any of you guys ever heard the theory that like corn is bloodthirsty, and like I guess the Portuguese or the Spanish were like trying to save the world by getting rid of corn because corn is like a native to America? Has anyone ever heard that wild crazy theory?
Not only
I've
corn.
heard the same thing about wheat in the Middle East, actually.
Quinoa,
like wheat, straight up domesticated people in Sumeria.
Yep.
So quinoa is my favorite example though, because in Peru, like the conquistadors and Spaniards wanted to burn, and they continued to burn as many of the fields as they could because they were afraid the quinoa would replace wheat in the Eucharist. And they're like, we can't have quinoa Eucharist.
But it's so much healthier than wheat. It's not good for you, but we'd be
living in this crazy world if we like lived off quinoa.
My wife loves quinoa. She's from Peru.
Children of the quinoa would have been. Imagine children of the quinoa.
Making quinoa, when you got it dry, put it flat right in the frying pan, no butter, no oil, no nothing. Toast it a little bit, and then just put water on top of it to get it edible. Oh my god, toasted quinoa is amazing.
I love quinoa.
Nice.
Big fan.
You'll never eat it plain again.
Well, so is we 3 hours deep? Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover? Because like I didn't want to.
I got a way to exit it. I want to ask like what everyone is like the last miracle that they performed or something along those lines. I can give you my example. For me, it was I remember a dream I had a little while ago. This is just something that came up recently in my memory, but I had a dream a little while ago that I read the text message on my phone, and supposedly that's supposed to be like impossible to do. Like you're not supposed to be able to read in your dream, but I definitely read in my dream, so I thought that was kind of a little miracle. Yeah.
Dreams are actually really significant. Honestly, if I think if I were to teach people one thing that would be good for them, where they don't have to do all this other religious stuff, and they may not want to sit and meditate, I would direct them towards remembering their dreams and trying to deepen that experience. That alone, I think, would make everybody at least spiritually skeptical, if not spiritual itself.
Yeah.
I think,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
It's funny you bring that up, because I've been kind of like meditating on, or contemplating this idea that keeps coming up, that consciousness comes from brains, and I think that doesn't come from thinking about it properly. I think the more you look at it, the more things become obvious, and that's one of the things that I'd mention, is that it's like you're talking about a pretty damn mystical organ there.
I'll hold the music for a minute.
Yeah, if you can receive legitimate information from a subjective experience like that, where the brain was barely involved, then I think that just shows like, your consciousness doesn't come from brains. Cue that music.
Here, Jangle Pop. There's 5 of you. Close to 6. I hope you all check out the deleted scenes.
And don't watch a whole lot or else unless you're really, really prepared.
I think the first thing I need to do is I need to get like a bunch of oh, look at you, Benoit, $5. I don't know what you wanted to hear, but you get. If you wanted Box Saga,
That's fucking perfect. Holy shit.
I have to explain. Yeah, I know it's amazing. No, I know it's every genre you'd ever want. We could do all of them all at once. I think the miracle. I think every day is a miracle all the time. Everything. I'm always like, another miracle. Like it feels like Mr. Magoo for me, where there's nothing and I step, and all of a sudden there's something there to step on all the time. Life has been, like I'm withheld in my boundaries of what I'm supposed to do, but I kind of vibe with that cave monk thing. And yeah, post-punk synthwave goth stuff. If you think that's not what I'm doing, like all the time, like oh my god, like I don't even know where to start.
Goth is such a wide genre, though. Like,
yeah, this has got a little doomed in with a little bit of that garage rock revival, post-garage revival.
Probably a dub bass.
That's intense.
A little bit of disco and a little funk fusion. Well, 1980, 87, 86 in there. I got a lot.
I was like Gloria Estefan.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some Killing Joke. You're right. Like 80s. I'm living in the 80s. We're gonna have to do all this. This is true. This is important stuff.
Oh, fuck yeah.
But yeah, doesn't it feel like we're all living in the miracle age, and you just don't even like.
We don't even know it.
Yeah, like Ellen DeGeneres talks about this one time she met God, and God was telling her, like nobody loves my miracles. Like for instance, the like the urinal that you can just like walk away from and flush, or your hands and you put the water and it just washes. Like little miracles like that. Nobody like appreciates those anymore. And it's a dumb joke, but it's true because we live in this world where the technology has been like an explanation, an excuse. Like, oh, of course. My life is fine because there's science and all that, but it's just an excuse at the end of the day. And I think it makes us like more irreverent.
Yeah, my last miracle is my friend called me at like 6:30 in the morning on Sunday, and I had a fucked up night before. I was hungover as shit, and I seen some things I didn't want to see. And he calls me up. He's like, "Bro, my other buddy's canceled on me, and I have to move today. Can you help me?" And I look at my phone, 6:30 in the morning. Yeah, what time will you be here? Half an hour. That's a fucking miracle, he tells me.
Dude. Will, you got any miracles? Aside from not disappearing?
It's a miracle I'm still standing.
Damn straight. And don't forget it, man. Like, appreciate that.
Yeah.
How many people don't get to? Seriously, imagine that.
For real. Like, I shouldn't be. And my life has been easy. That means most individuals whose life have been harder probably didn't make it. So I should be thankful. You know what I mean?
Goals, got to keep them alive. Chasing all my dreams, aiming to thrive. Even when it's tough, I won't let them slide. Always keep my goals inside. Goals inside. I have goals, striving every day.
Reminds me of Skylar Spence.
I have goals, striving every day. That's good shit.
Good, right?
That's ridiculous.
You listen to St. Pepsi?
Oh, that's Room 5 shit.
Don't you see? Leave your mark, create your legacy. Fulfilling my destiny. That's my natural story. Write the past, illuminate your future. Make your dreams last.
There's no karma.
Dude, it was a great year.